Thea in the DC Universe. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151 vs. Legendary Team, Part 2. Sarah was incredibly lucky. She'd started late, and of all the people present, she and Thea were the closest. Furthermore, Thea had come all the way to rescue her in 2008, so she couldn't possibly repay her kindness with a vengeance. She seemingly rushed out with a team, but in reality, she was taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, still a long way from Thea. The ball of light didn't explode in front of her, and she used the heat of her sturdy arms and waist to avoid most of the glare. Although somewhat uncomfortable, she still saw the dense webs and nimbly dodged them. Ray Palmer, though usually a bit of a goofball, his atom suit was truly impressive. He shrank the moment the webs approached him, weaving through them. The remaining firestorm, perhaps a fusion of 2 people, was a bit confused, constantly rolling his eyes at people. It wasn't the kind of eye roll you see in anime, nor was it the kind used in the adjective sense. It was simply the act of flipping the black eyeballs to reveal the white. Thea couldn't understand how they were receiving retinal signals like that, but she knew her flash technique had no effect on them. The combined creature, blazing with flames, streaked straight through the center of the web, leaving a charred, human-shaped hole in its wake. Captain Cold, on the outermost edge, hesitated, debating whether to save his partner first or attack Thea first. Sarah, completely disinclined to fight, feigned the air of an 80-year-old woman, still sauntering forward. In the end, only the hilariously awkward Atom and the combined firestorm were left charging ahead of Thea. These 2 were formidable opponents, and Thea naturally took no chances. However, their fighting styles were immature. The Atom's personal chivalry was too strong. His suit clearly had ranged weapons, but he stubbornly insisted on hand-to-hand combat. A nerdy, PhD-educated nerd fighting a modern-day martial artist like Thea was doomed to fail. Thea paid no attention to him, simply dealing with him casually. Her focus remained on Firestorm in the sky and Captain Cold approaching from a distance. Firestorm's flying ability was quite fast, but he primarily used the reverse thrust of his flames to accelerate. While his 2 streaks of flame might seem impressive and powerful, his steering was actually quite poor. If Thea still had her skateboard, she'd have absolutely crushed him. Dr. Palmer, is your suit sturdy? Thea asked the Atom with a smile, dodging Firestorm's air-to-ground fireballs. Of course it is. My suit is made of. Before he could even finish what material it was made of, Thea's robotic arm went full power, grabbed one of his arms, spun 3 times in place like a discus, and hurled it towards Firestorm in midair. The black man and the fat old man were truly clueless. Seeing the Atom flying towards them, they reached out without a second thought. Thea had been waiting for this moment. Their fusion had its share of problems. The black man and the portly old man's coordination always felt a bit slow. The original plot had a glorious defeat, with the 2 separated by an arrow. The arrow was shot by none other than Thea's biological father, Malcolm Merlyn. Of course, in the current timeline, they hadn't yet met Malcolm, and hadn't realized the magnitude of their seemingly impressive fusion. Thea aimed her arrow precisely, piercing Firestorm's chest. There was a momentary pause in their communication. One tried to run left, the other desperately dodged right, and they both exited their fusion state, bewildered. Fortunately, the Atom was nearby and helped them up, preventing them from falling. They both landed on the ground, both swollen. They tried to merge again, but their hands were swollen and there was no sign of fusion. Thea observed the scene from the corner of her eye, her mind reassured. Super speed, super transformation abilities, and far superhuman physical strength and damage reduction, such a well-balanced combination. Did you think you were superhuman? With so many abilities, there must be limits. Otherwise, with such strength, no one would be able to defeat you. Thea had anticipated the cooldown of fusion. Since they couldn't merge, the threat to Thea instantly decreased from maximum to minimum. She turned to look at Sir Lance, the White Canary, who had finally arrived. That's strange. You're much stronger than I thought Thea was. Sarah, determined not to kill again, asked doubtfully, her baton in hand. Thea hadn't displayed any supernatural abilities at this point. They'd mistaken her flash spell for a flashbang, and she'd fought them with bows and arrows. Although Sarah didn't see any clues, her intuition told her that the Thea before her was more than capable of killing her. Hearing her question, Thea rolled her eyes. How strange. Do you think I'm those two Hawkman and Hawkgirl who've been reborn 206 times and are still a pair of weaklings? Those two were a complete disgrace to the reborn. Thea didn't bother explaining, silently raising her hand in a gesture of invitation. Come to think of it, I haven't fought you yet, but judging by your moves, you're still using the skills of the League of Assassins. So, you and Malcolm have met. Sarah adjusted her pace, analyzing why Thea was so powerful. In her timeline, Thea should still be living in Star City. But seeing Thea's initial movements, she suddenly understood. So that's why. She and Malcolm had met beforehand, believing she had found a reasonable explanation for the timeline distortion. Sarah felt much more at ease. Thea neither acknowledged nor refuted her speculation, believing it was a trivial matter. It was rare to encounter a pure earthling, without frivolous abilities or technological gadgets. Thea sheathed her bow and arrows and secretly disarmed her robotic arm. She wanted to face this legendary team leader, who had surpassed her master, in a fair and square encounter. Drawing their swords, the two exchanged greetings and began to duel according to the League's rules. This fight was far less intense than the previous one with Talia, and neither of them had any killing intent. Thea surpassed Sarah in height, combat proficiency, strength, and speed, but the advantage wasn't overwhelming. Initially, Sarah hoped to defeat Thea on her own merit, but she soon discovered that her experience was even greater. Instead, due to her time with the Legends, she'd been constantly dealing with laser guns, primitive aliens, and other weapons. It had been a long time since she'd faced a skilled fighter of her level. After trading blows for 7 or 8 moves, her offensive power was gradually overwhelmed. Thea was well versed in her martial arts. Her skill level was far inferior to that of old Mon Talia, and certainly not to Thea's current state. However, out of admiration for her future responsibility, she refrained from any drastic action. Aiming for a draw. With her deliberate slack, Sarah recovered a bit, and the Atom, standing nearby, watched with wide, adorable eyes. It wasn't until Captain Cold called out, "Sarah, I'm here to help," that he realized they were still in a fighting position and, sluggishly, rushed forward to join the attack. Chapter 152 claims. The three of them seemed outnumbered, but in reality, they were essentially the same as before. In the chaotic scuffle, Captain Cold's freeze gun was useless, so he could only draw a dagger for close combat. The Atom was a complete hindrance. Not only was he in the way, but his 6 feet 5 inches frame, combined with his battlesuit, obscured his vision, making the shorter Sarah furious. In the distance, the fat old man and the black young man cheered them on, much to Thea's amusement. Sure enough, the heroes on the side of justice all had a bit of a comedic streak. If they were Gotham's villains, they would have run away by now. Thinking of running, Thea prepared to retreat. It wasn't that she couldn't win, but fighting them was pointless. Winning or losing wouldn't be a good thing. She had to save face for both sides. She kicked Captain Cold away and grabbed Sarah's arm, holding it in front of her to block the Atom's punch. Thea flung a Batman brand smoke bomb with a bang. This smoke, specially crafted by the Master, was impervious to infrared and thermal imaging, making it arguably the most effective escape weapon in the DC universe. Where are they? Where are they? The Atom, his helmet adorned with X-ray technology, looked around, seeing nothing but a white haze. When the smoke cleared, they were the only ones left. They were thankful they were unharmed, but the two men in the web were utterly frustrated. The more they struggled, the more they became entangled. Rip passed out. Heatwave, a rugged man with exceptional physique, managed to maintain some consciousness, but his head and face were now covered in white spider webs, a truly awful sight. Although they lacked the escape potion Thea had prepared, Ray Palmer and the chubby old man were both top scientists. After a brief analysis, they managed to free Rip Hunter and Heatwave. They managed to get them down, but Rip Hunter's previously stylish beige stand-up collar windbreaker and Heatwave's army green fire-resistant suit were completely entangled and could not be removed. Furious, Heatwave pulled out his flamethrower and unleashed a furious blast at the spiderwebs, burning everything, including his clothes, to ash. He then retreated in anger. Everyone was a little crestfallen. Thea didn't appear particularly powerful at the moment, but she'd crushed them with near-perfect ease, leaving them with serious doubts about their ability to save the world in the future. Yet, if a single underling from Team Arrow had beaten the 7 of them to such a state, Wouldn't someone even stronger than Green Arrow have been able to defeat them in a matter of minutes? Rip Hunter, now stripped of his trench coat and wearing only a shirt, instantly transformed his demeanor from handsome, rich, and handsome to poor and pathetic. But he didn't have time to dwell on his image. He turned to the AI on the console. Gideon, Captain, I'm here. A light blue three-dimensional holographic projection appeared on the console, its mouth half opening as it replied in a steady voice. Gideon, help me find which timeline the Time Wanderer is currently in. We must save everyone before she does. The light blue figure was silent for a moment, as if after a careful examination. Captain, the Time Wanderer has not appeared in any timeline, past, future, or present. What do you mean? Rip Hunter was a little confused. Captain, according to tradition, the Time Wanderer is dead, no longer exists, completely annihilated. Leaving no trace on the timeline. How can that be? Rip Hunter was dumbfounded. He wasn't one of those righteous heroes who didn't understand the situation. As a member of the Time Lord's Council, he knew. The Time Wanderer was the Council's top killer. And now, this top killer had barely appeared, and before he could even do anything, he was beaten to death by a passing hero with just a few punches and kicks. Is your number one position too weak? Or are the heroes of the main plane also powerful, while the Time Council are just frogs in the well, shutting themselves in and declaring themselves the world's top killer? What a bunch of losers. Rip Hunter was growing increasingly disenchanted with the organization he once served. The people you trained are so weak. He was momentarily lost for words. The Time Traveler's methods were simple and ruthless. They sought out a time before the Legends members rose to prominence and eliminated them beforehand. Rip's original plan was to get ahead of the curve and bring back all the members' predecessors for safekeeping. But now the assassins were dead, protecting them was pointless. He turned to Sarah and asked, which time do you plan to send your past to? Although a little sad, Sarah paused for a moment. Outside of Purgatory Island in October 2008, along the route of the Assassin's League's Nissa Al Ghul trial, Rip nodded slightly and patted his capable comrade on the shoulder. Gideon, we're heading to October 2008. Everyone, take your seats and get ready to depart. The latter part was addressed to the remaining crew members. But after they sat down like elementary school students and waited for 5 minutes, nothing happened. Several people looked at Rip in confusion, implying, what's wrong with your ship again? The black man, the ship's repairman, was already preparing to repair it. Captain, yes, the blue electronic voice hadn't finished before a clear voice interrupted. Haha, it's me. Sorry to bother you. The one who treated her like an outsider was Miss Thea. She separated from them and ran a short distance before remembering the damage to her skateboard caused by her unprovoked blocking of a gun. She had to seek compensation. With so much futuristic technology on board, she couldn't let it go. She circled back again. Her suggestion spell wasn't effective against hostile targets. Fortunately, except for Captain Cold and Heatwave, the others on board were all on the side of justice and had no ill will towards her. With her expert stealth skills, she used shadows to hide from the two hostile eyes, and follow them onto the ship. Just as she was contemplating how to start her conversation, she was surprised by their impatience. They took off without a word, and Miss Thea was spotted by the ubiquitous AI. To avoid embarrassment, she had to step forward. Why you again? Heatwave, who thought more with his fists than his head, was furious just looking at her. He'd worn that fireproof suit for so many years, he'd grown attached to it. It was all because of her that he'd burned it in his anger. She had to be there. He was eager to join in the fight, but the gloomy Captain Cold held him back, observing the situation with a cold eye. Miss Quinn, what's the matter with you? Rip, the captain, asked first. If it's nothing, I'm not here yet, Thea said, crossing her shoulders. That woman in black was here to cause you trouble, wasn't she? There was nothing to hide. It was the truth. Rip nodded. You mean the time traveler? Yes, she'd been waiting for that. Thea raised her skateboard and pointed at the large hole in it. She destroyed my equipment. Without it, I can't leave the island. My mother is home alone. I'd be so pitiful if I couldn't get back. You're responsible for repairing it, right? She could easily get back by helicopter, but Rip and the others didn't know. Thea made her plight seem bleak. Chapter 153, The Dark History of Vandalin Hawkman and Hawkgirl. Seeing Thea acting so utterly adorable and pathetic, without any real mastery, filled the crowd with mixed emotions, especially Rip Hunter. Could the time traveler, A killer so feared throughout the multiverse, really have been taken down by this guy? Fortunately, she wasn't trying to extort money, and her demands were reasonable. With an AI on board and 2 PhDs whose papers sold by the pound, it was just a matter of fixing a piece of technological equipment. The spaceship itself could be fixed. Just as he was about to call for help, he quickly dismissed her. "Captain, I want to remind you that we've been staying at this point in time too long, and we've attracted the attention of the Council at this point in time. Search teams are expected to arrive within 3 minutes and 12 seconds, the AI Gideon announced calmly. "Oh my god." Rip Hunter slapped his forehead and quickly walked over to Thea. "Miss Quinn, you heard it too. We're leaving. Do you think you should?" So, was that a sign that she should run? Thea wasn't so easily fooled. The damage to her skateboard wasn't serious. Back in Star City, the tools were readily available and could be repaired in half a day. She was simply using this as an excuse to get aboard. The ship was packed with so much advanced technology, including the Atom suit's energy source and shrinking technology, it made her jealous. "Now you want to kick her out? Dream on." Shaking her head fiercely, she insisted, "Even if you force me off the ship now, I can't go home. I'm staying here, Miss Quinn. I'm doing this for your own good. If you insist on traveling with us, I welcome you. However, your own historical trajectory will be forcibly erased. You're different from us, a crucial figure in the timeline, and you can't leave easily." Rip Hunter spoke sincerely. He had chosen only those who would have little impact on the original timeline. Hearing this, Thea was startled. So not everyone could get on board. He didn't seem to be lying, so she decided to leave immediately. It would be a waste of so many valuable things. "In that case, I'll take my leave," Thea said, and she ran out. "Miss Quinn, you can actually time travel," the AI Gideon said to the astonished gazes of the crowd. Thea also stopped, waiting to hear what it had to say. "Gideon, are you mistaken?" As the captain, Rip was well aware of the rules. Those who could cause a fluctuation in the timeline by more than 1% were strictly prohibited from time traveling, as even the slightest mistake could cause massive disruption. Gideon remained calm and composed. "Captain, I'm not mistaken. Miss Quinn's body has somehow absorbed some of the characteristics of a time traveler, but she lacks formal appointment by the Temporal Council. According to Article 112, Section 18 of the Council, she is fully qualified to time travel." "You mean, she's qualified to time travel, without disrupting the timeline and maintaining the original trajectory?" Rip Hunter was also a little confused. This was the first time he had heard of such a situation. After carefully questioning Gideon, he quickly explained the general situation to Thea, recounting the details. He ran out of time to elaborate. Although she didn't understand some of the words, Thea still grasped some of the inside story. Simply put, when the woman in black blew herself up, her work permit was left with Thea. Unlike Rip Hunter, who was aboard this spaceship, he was merely a former employee of the Time Lords Council. The rest of the crew had been privately recruited, each and every one a temporary employee. Thinking of this, Thea felt a sudden sense of empowerment. Although she hadn't started work, at least she was a regular employee. Knowing it wouldn't affect her future, Thea quickly found a seat and took a seat. If they didn't leave, they'd be discovered. The time travel itself was unremarkable, practically a fleeting moment, with no chance of seeing the scenery along the way. This brief journey left Thea feeling utterly uneasy, as if something within her body was bubbling up. She'd heard from several people that time travel symptoms, some experiencing aphasia, some experiencing blindness, were normal, and these symptoms would resolve after a while, so Thea put her worries to rest. The spaceship docked on land. Upon learning they were returning Sarah from 2008 to her original historical trajectory, 3 months after Thea's departure, Thea didn't disembark. She felt it was like releasing an animal into the wild, too boring, so she simply toured the spaceship. "Are you Miss Kendra?" Thea stopped an African-American woman and approached her to greet her. This woman was Hawkgirl, a high priestess in Egypt in her previous life, or rather, her original one. The sphere of Horus in her hand was perfect for translation. Hawkgirl smiled shyly. "Thea, I actually know you. It was you and Oliver who helped us back then, damn. This was such a terrible feeling. I knew her, and she knew me, but I had to pretend I didn't know her. And she had to explain why I didn't know her. Time travel was the easiest place to mess up. Thea didn't bother to waste time on her. After a brief conversation with the others on the ship, She had already figured out that her husband, Hawkman, had been dead for a long time. Honestly, she despised the couple. They'd been reincarnated from ancient Egypt to the present day, a total of 206 times. So many wasted reincarnations, and what was the result? Each time, they were hunted by their nemesis, Vandal Savage. The old man hadn't tired of killing them 206 times. It was insane. Normally, their memories would awaken upon adulthood, so knowing their nemesis was coming, they should have made some preparations. But what did they do? They just ran. They were chased like sheep, from Siberia to Canberra, from Yokohama to Congo, climbing snow-capped mountains, crossing grasslands, and traversing deserts. Besides measuring the world on foot, they had made no contribution to human development. To be able to chase them to such a point, you'd have to think this Vandal Savage was incredibly powerful. With a D in his name, was he Darkseid's cousin? The kind who could kill Superman with a single punch and Batman with a backhand? Actually, that's not the case at all. Vandal Savage, aside from his ferocious beard, was only known for his ability to throw two throwing knives. Perhaps bored by the 4,000 years of pursuit, he'd spent a year or so honing this unique skill. Beyond that, he possessed no special abilities. Yet, the bearded man's ambitions were unwavering, a desire for world domination. He'd plotted for another 4,000 years, relying on his immortality. Finally, in 2166, he'd outlasted all the capable heroes with his sluggish tactics, finally claiming to be king of the world from a rooftop. Rip Hunter, deeply resentful of the old man and unable to see him thrive, resigned in anger and, in 2016, gathered a crew of friends to disrupt his dream. This was the general plot, as Thea knew it, a grand adventure steeped in revolutionary optimism. Chapter 154 Horse Suit? Hawkgirl Kendra, unaware of Thea's internal grumbling, asked kindly, "You didn't get off the spaceship. What do you want from me?" Of course Thea did. The densely packed text on the Horus orb she'd found on Infernal Island that day had left her perplexed. After repeated research and comparisons, she was dismayed to discover that most of the text had been lost. Fortunately, there were only 3 individuals from that era who had survived: Vandal Savage, the former High Priest of ancient Egypt, Priestess Chayla, now Hawkgirl Kendra, and Prince Khufu, now Hawkman. Vandal would certainly ignore Thea, and Hawkman was dead. Even if he hadn't, Thea wouldn't have had feelings for him. Remember, his first life was Khufu, the man famous for building the largest pyramid in history. History describes him as a boastful, uneducated, and full of nonsense. Facing the kind Hawkgirl, Thea still held a glimmer of hope and pulled the orb from her backpack. "Do you remember this?" Kendra took the orb, shook it in her hand, and asked uncertainly, "Is it a hammer?" Puff. Thea nearly spat out blood. "Fuck a hammer." Perhaps her expression, as if her father had died, was a little frightening. Kendra knew she'd misunderstood and said sheepishly, "You might not know, but 6 months ago, I was just a waitress at a cafe. I don't know much about combat." Yes, she didn't know much about combat. That was the truth. Her beloved husband, who had been with her for 206 lifetimes, taught her the way to fight: spread your wings, fly with a hammer, and slam into the enemy's head. If the enemy fell, it was over. If they didn't, fly away and slam again. What a ridiculous tactic. With unparalleled speed, how much damage could a sharp weapon inflict at high speed? At speeds approaching the speed of sound, wielding a 3-meter-long spear, the intense impact would surely knock a few drops of blood off even Darkseid. Even if they couldn't win, it would still be tragic, right? They'd abandoned that attack method and opted for hammers. 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 I repeat, fly right in front of the enemy, swing your arms, and hammer them down. The sheer kinetic energy was completely wasted. Even if they were using hammers, they could have just used a large one. Instead, they resorted to using small, one-handed hammers, which might have done less damage than Thea could throw a rock. Sigh. Thea knew she couldn't expect too much from these weaklings, but the grisly reality still weighed on her. Did she really have to ask Vandal? "Miss Thea, I can translate these words," the ubiquitous AI, Gideon, interrupted her thoughts. Honestly, Thea was a little afraid of the AI aboard this ship. She coveted its technological advances, but she didn't dare target them. Others didn't know, but she knew Gideon had developed a crush on Captain Rip Hunter. What did that mean? This meant that this AI possessed emotions. It had reached the pinnacle of artificial intelligence, On par with Marvel's Ultron and Aida, and slightly behind Brainiac, but not by much. If it weren't for his relationship with Rip Hunter, Gideon would have unleashed a nuclear bomb in a matter of minutes if he connected to the real-world network. Thea had always kept a respectful distance from this deeply hidden, boss-level character. Although she yearned for the AI day and night, she had never considered striking Gideon. Now that it had approached her, she couldn't refuse and could only politely express her gratitude. As the pinnacle of human wisdom, spanning time and versed in ancient and modern knowledge, Gideon's abilities were truly remarkable. In less than 3 minutes, he completely deciphered the text on the Horus sphere and even thoughtfully compiled an annotated version. This guy was incredible, Thea thought to herself, holding the annotated version. Through various calculations, it had roughly estimated Thea's knowledge structure and level of understanding. Its annotations were incredibly precise, tailor-made for Thea. Although she didn't like the feeling of having her secrets revealed, she had to admit that Gideon's translation was spot on. But when she looked at the translated document carefully, her brows furrowed involuntarily. Horus was the patron god of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs and a symbol of royal power. Horus usually accepted priests in the form of a human with an eagle's head. There are 3 artifacts of his that have been passed down to the world: the Eye of Horus, the Scepter of Horus, and the Orb of Horus. The Eye of Horus was said to have been dedicated to Hades, the orb was in Thea's hands, and the scepter was specially marked by Gideon and was in the hands of Vandal Savage. Thea squinted her eyes. This artificial intelligence was quite cunning, leaving a bait for Thea to bite. Do you want the scepter? Okay, let's go and fight Vandal to the death. He also happens to be the enemy of the legendary team. What a coincidence. What a fate. Being used as a pawn is unpleasant for anyone. Thea lowered her head in thought. She had the impression that Vandal's staff of Horus was destroyed by the combined efforts of Green Arrow and the Flash. Whether he still had it in this timeline was a mystery. Sigh, Thea sighed, unable to resist the temptation. Should she help? Frustrated, her experiences in Gotham had made Thea somewhat reluctant to help. These people seemed a bit stronger than the Batman's family, but only slightly. She wondered if helping them would make her a key player. In Hawkgirl and her companion's timeline, the staff was already destroyed, but for Thea, it hadn't happened yet. This created a paradox. Had it actually happened? If it was still there, she'd be happy to take it. It was a suit. If it was already destroyed, even if she chopped Vandal into pieces and fed it to the dogs, it would be useless. Thea shook her head, saying goodbye to the malicious AI and the bewildered Kendra Hawkgirl. She was ready to ask the old driver, no, old Captain Rip Hunter. Before she could find the old captain, Thea was stopped by Ray Palmer, the Atom. The Atom, with a smile on his face, had been helping to repair her skateboard, and dragged her to see the latest achievements. Thea had no choice but to go with him. Since he was so eager to help, she had to take the initiative. Ms. Thea, was the software control of your skateboard written by Felicity? The funny Ray Palmer said with a wise look. Oh my god, is he really that amazing? Thea had just been seen through by Gideon, and now he revealed the source of the technology. She was a little bit unable to accept it. Artificial intelligence is fine, and it's not surprising that countless calculations per second can be seen through. How did you, a funny guy, find out? Dr. Palmer, how did you see that? Are the traces so obvious? Ray Palmer laughed triumphantly at first, and then his face suddenly became serious. In fact, she also wrote part of the software of my battlesuit. Haha. Chapter 155 Brand New Skateboard. Thea looked at him speechlessly. This funny guy has a really good personality. He's tall, sunny, handsome, and has a wonderful sense of humor. As a friend, he's definitely a mentor. But as a boyfriend, he's the ultimate tragedy. He'll screw you over without mercy. He's out of line. The two of them arrived at the Wave Riders repair room, where the Firestorm duo were also. The black guy was the ship's repairman. The fat old man looked serious, but he was actually just a chatterbox. When Thea entered, she saw him still chattering with the black guy. Let me introduce you. This is Professor Martin Stein, a leading authority in nuclear physics. And this is his partner, Jackson, our ship's maintenance man. He's a skilled technician. Ray Palmer introduced them. Seeing them repairing his skateboard, Thea, respectfully complimenting them, showered them with praise. He called them the leading figures of the physics frontier, saviors of Central City, and defenders of justice for humanity, That's the good thing about heroes on the side of justice, they're thin-skinned. The fat old man, with his countless Nobel Prizes and constant praise, seems to have a slightly stronger immune system. The black guy working as a mechanic was completely embarrassed, his huge white teeth bared in a brilliant smile. Thea complimented him without asking for money while observing his work. Remember, this guy was a mechanic 6 months ago, dragged into spaceship repair by the careless Rip Hunter. Thea had always been skeptical of his skills. But after seeing him in person, she realized the black guy's repair skills were indeed quite impressive. While not quite on par with the almighty Batman, they were certainly gifted. Your board was originally magnetically powered, right? We didn't touch the drive system, we simply added a few speed settings. You can use high speed for regular commuting, and control it freely in combat. This will improve your unit synchronization with the board, the Atom explained, pointing to a device on the board's underside. Also, I upgraded your software. Or rather, I used Felicity's 2016 code to override her 2007 code. After all, she wrote the software that drives my suit. He then went on to explain several major changes. This guy truly lived up to his reputation as a weak-in Iron Man. In just half a day, without any major changes, he'd improved the board's overall performance by another 30%. If the original version was only version 0.7, this one was now considered the official version. Both braking and synchronization had been greatly enhanced. After a few attempts at operating it indoors, Thea found her agility had greatly improved. To say she could use it like her own arm was an understatement. Gratitude was appreciated, but Thea, coveting the ship's technological achievements, was a person who could squeeze every last drop of oil out of a rock. Gideon was too clever and intimidating to exploit, but these three seemed like they could be exploited. Thank you, Dr. Palmer, Professor Stein, and Mr. Jackson. Without your help, I wouldn't be able to return home. She couldn't just tell them to hand over their valuables, they needed to contribute voluntarily. Thea fell back into her old ways of playing cute and pathetic. Watching Moira on stage, clamoring for the protection of women and children and the elimination of racial discrimination, Thea's acting skills had improved dramatically. While she wouldn't say she could play any role perfectly, she was more than capable of handling these heroes, quickly captivating the three. The first to give in was the single black guy. There were only 2 men on the ship, more than women. Sarah and Captain Cold had a spark, but both were ruthless, and the black guy didn't dare to flirt with Sarah. The remaining innocent Kendra, who had a husband from the 206th life, was immediately succeeded by the handsome Adam after his death, leaving her with no chance. Now, facing Thea's pretentiousness, despite knowing they couldn't possibly be together, the male instinct for showmanship prevailed. I'll install a deep link network for you, so you can remotely control your skateboard from 5 miles away. Isn't that impressive? The black man grinned, his eyes and mouth smirking. Mr. Jackson, I must remind you that the deep link network is a technology 35 years from now, and according to Article 19, Section 112 of the Time Council, it cannot be disclosed at will. Gideon's voice came out emotionlessly. The black man, acting as if he hadn't heard, deftly added a device to the side of the skateboard and flashed an OK sign. Thea had been holding back for so long, but all her efforts at pity paid off. This piece of technology was truly impressive, similar to Iron Man's remote-controlled suit. A steal. Having almost fully exploited the young man's usefulness, she glanced at the 2 high-ranking intellectuals with a gleaming gaze. The fat old man was old enough to be her grandfather, so naturally, he had no lecherous intentions. He was simply moved by her acting and felt a little sorry for her, a young girl. After a moment's thought, he pulled out 2 AA batteries, handed them to the black man, and gestured for him to install them. He explained to Thea that this wasn't future technology, but rather a nuclear battery he'd been researching, so she could use it with confidence. If the magnetic field suddenly disappeared, it could be used as an emergency measure. Thea's sweat dropped. If the magnetic field disappeared, how many people on Earth would be left alive? However, if the principle behind this thing were studied, it could be modified into a super bomb. Regardless, the fat old man offered his valuable gift without hesitation, truly worthy of being a master. The handsome Adam, by comparison, was much more resistant to Thea's beauty. After all 3 of them looked at him, he hesitated and offered to atomize the skateboard. He would complete the atomization in a day. This was a pleasant surprise. Thea had no objection to him taking it back and modifying it. This was his proprietary technology, and he certainly wouldn't modify it in front of them. After thanking them for their generosity, Thea didn't rush to find Rip Hunter and went back to rest. The next day, Thea received her brand new skateboard, version 1.1. It was about the size of a cigarette box, so she could just slip it anywhere, making it much lighter than the bulky bag she'd always carried everywhere. Unfortunately, the technology was probably difficult to hack. "Miss Thea, is your skateboard fixed?" Rip Hunter, having already returned Sarah from 2008 to her original timeline, beamed at her. "You don't have any excuses this time, do you? Go back to your own timeline." Thea felt she had already gotten all the benefits of the ship, so what was there to wait for? She nodded, ready to agree, when Gideon suddenly interrupted. "Captain, Miss Thea is going to join us in the crusade against Vandal Savage. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels." Chapter 156 Future Achievements? Hiss. Several people let out inexplicable exclamations. Is that what's going on? This little girl is truly kind-hearted, brave enough to do what's right? The trio of technicians who'd been bleeding heavily yesterday were now relieved. The initially reluctant big funny guy, now, the handsome Adam, had his face turned from cloudy to sunny. He shook Thea's hand vigorously. "A friend in need is a friend indeed. It seems I misunderstood you." The black guy and the fat old man also came over to express their gratitude. The black guy was a little embarrassed, but the fat old man didn't mind. He was old enough to be Thea's grandfather, and gave her a hug like a brother. Oh my God, Thea was in tears. She'd been tricked into it by this cunning AI. If she said no now, the trio would immediately turn against her. She wasn't afraid of that, but if they asked to take the tech back, how could she refuse? She couldn't just fight her way out. She couldn't do something so unkind. That damn Gideon, Thea hated him to death, yet she had to put on a brave face. "Drawing a sword to help is the true spirit of our kind," she said. "I won't return until I've conquered Lowland. Vandal Savage must die." While Rip Hunter thought her acting was a bit exaggerated, he saw it as a positive development. After all, Thea single-handedly took on 7 of them and managed to retreat on her own. That's real strength. As captain, he had no problem with her bringing her own food to help. Come on. It's just a place to stay, right? We have plenty of empty rooms on board, so you can stay wherever you want." Just as he was about to offer his welcome speech, Captain Cold sarcastically said, "What's her deal? Just a few arrows? We didn't use any weapons that day." The thought irritated him. In the future, he'd been fearless even to the Flash, yet now he was being outmaneuvered by a mere mortal, one of 7. And he was one of them. The thought infuriated him. Damn it, I wouldn't lose if I used my freeze gun. He was annoyed, and Heatwave, beside him, was even more furious. Captain Cold had at least gone up and tried a few moves, but whether they worked or not was another matter. He hadn't seen what was happening when he was caught in the net, and had been a spectator the entire time. He was rescued afterward, looking like a dead pig, looking utterly miserable. Thea sullenly ignored them, oblivious to their hostility. "I'm not going to explain to you. If you guys want to fight, I'll just take advantage and get off the boat." No one can say anything, but her thoughts didn't escape Gideon, who was calculating hundreds of trillions of times per second. The intimidating AI chimed in again. According to Article 2, Section 55 of the Temporal Council Principles Act, members of the Waverider may access the historical records of special personnel. This requires the consent of at least 3 persons. I agree too, Captain Cold and Heatwave said as soon as it finished speaking. There was a moment of silence as everyone wondered who would be the third to jump out. I'm actually quite curious too, said the handsome Billy Palmer, noticing the silence. I agree, he said, giving Thea an apologetic smile. HMPH, Thea glanced at him. He was a billionaire, after all. He was sunny and cheerful, but that didn't mean he was stupid. If you were stupid, would his billions have fallen from the sky? As a fellow wealthy person, Thea knew this style of doing things all too well. It was a way to take advantage of others without offending anyone. Because she was that kind of person, too. After receiving the authorization, Gideon smiled a smile that others saw as calm, but Thea saw as smug. Query underway. Thea Quinn, the last recorded Grandmaster in human history, made her last public appearance at her brother Oliver Queen's 86-year-old funeral in 2071. She still retained her youthful appearance, then vanished into history. These words stunned everyone, even the woman herself, Thea. So, I'm going to be so impressive in the future. Listen, the final Grandmaster. So impressive. Sarah Lance, who had briefly spent a few days on Team Arrow and knew Thea's past, had a glazed look in her eyes. Isn't this different from what I remembered? Or was I just meeting a fake Thea, a master? Captain Cold wasn't satisfied with his conclusion. What were her outstanding deeds? Sorry, this involves major historical events and cannot be disclosed. Gideon, facing Thea's bewildered gaze, refused Captain Cold's request. Can't reveal it? She seems like an important figure, Captain Cold speculated, rubbing his chin. Then how did she come into the public eye? Can we talk about that? Gideon's voice remained calm. We need the consent of the person involved. Everyone's eyes involuntarily turned to Thea, a mixture of curiosity, surprise, and gossip. Their curiosity was shared by Thea herself, as she felt she had covered up her secret well. How had the truth been revealed? Okay, I agree. Even as she agreed, she felt a deep hatred for this sinister AI. Can't you just tell me in private? They waited intently, but after 2 minutes, Gideon remained silent. Just when Rip Hunter thought it had frozen, it finally spoke. We need the consent of the other person involved. A wave of questions etched itself in their heads. What did that mean? This involved us too? They stared at each other as if they were about to expose a traitor. Is it you? It has to be you, right, Gideon? Whose consent do you need? Captain Rip Hunter didn't bother to guess and simply asked. Mr. Snart, Gideon said, surprising everyone. Captain Cold's mouth opened a little wider than usual, his usual pretense dropping. I didn't know her in the past, and I definitely didn't have any contact with her. And it won't happen in the future. Did you say that time travel erases our original trajectory? That means I won't be able to meet her in the future. His analysis was spot on, and the few team members who considered themselves intelligent were pondering it. Thea was also wondering how she could have come into contact with him. He was in Central City, and she was in Star City. Normally, they wouldn't have any contact. Mr. Snart, you robbed the Central City Historical Museum in 2010. Miss Thea, who was presiding over the meeting at the time, was forced to stop you. This is what history records. Captain Cold stood up angrily and said, nonsense, I have never seen her. I didn't rob any museum in 2010, no, you have seen her. History will not be wrong. Seeing that it said it so decisively, Captain Cold was a little unsure and asked his good partner Heatwave, Mick, do you remember? After getting an uncertain answer, he was a little confused for a moment. It didn't make sense. His memory was very clear. He definitely didn't know Thea. Chapter 157 Shocking Change. Mr. Snart, Gideon continued in his exasperated tone, Miss Thea possesses most of the time traveler's privileges. Her power level is higher than yours. If she were in the same timeline as you, she would automatically overwrite part of your past. Captain Cold finally realized what it meant to be thunderstruck. He vaguely felt some of his memories slipping. Damn it, you didn't say anything when she came aboard. You screwed me. What's the point of saying it now? If Thea knew what he was thinking, she would definitely run over to shake his hand. You finally understand me, don't you? This guy is so mean, he's just a ruthless swindler. Sarah Lance, who had been silent the whole time, pointed at Thea and said, she's probably the one who interacts with me the most. Is there still a future for me? Gideon calculated for a moment. If Miss Thea continues on her original trajectory and shoots you in 2015, your history won't change much, so, I have to beg her to shoot me when the time comes? Why am I so mean? Sarah's expression was either ugly or speechless. She looked at Thea silently without saying anything. Only then did Thea remember that she had indeed shot Sarah Lance to death in the 3rd year of the plot, but Old Ma had taken the blame at the time, while Oliver, who was obsessed with his sister, had pretended it never happened and got away with it. But now Old Ma had been ordered by her to go back to his roots. Who should she look for the scapegoat? And she probably didn't know about this. After all, it hadn't happened yet. Thea immediately used her increasingly skilled acting skills to make an expression of confusion. To be honest, this expression was a real test of her acting skills, and the time was too short to figure it out. Thea could only use all her skills to affectionately portray the image of this ignorant girl. Afraid that her expression would be exposed, she added a hint. Fortunately, the crew was all skilled at violence, lacking a teacher of both virtue and talent. While Gideon might be cunning, she wasn't yet human, and it was impossible to fully simulate human emotions through calculations. Several factors contributed to her successful performance. Previously, the legends only knew that Sarah Lance had been killed and resurrected. But they had never known the murderer, and today they finally discovered the truth. There was only one truth: you, the killer. But seeing Sarah's unconcerned expression, they could imagine another story. Naturally, they wouldn't meddle, and could only lament the small world. Don't ask any more questions. We're ready to depart. Since Miss Thea is joining us, let me explain our mission objectives. Rip Hunter quickly interrupted their questions. The timeline was fragile, and Thea had to return to the original time. If she knew too much and acted rashly, half of the legends could be wiped out. He quickly stopped the gossipers. His so-called objective was actually quite simple, but the specific battle plan was even more bizarre and outrageous. Using the spaceship's teleportation capabilities, a group of time travelers would fly into Vandal Savage's backyard, then swiftly capture him and bring him back. No cover, no support, no plan 1 or 2. It was a one-shot attack. Everyone would rush in, unleash their ultimates, and then recapture him, regardless of life or death. This plan was utterly foolish. Thea was filled with contempt for their tactics. You know, you're outside the timeline. Yet you know everything. Using such a powerful hack, you'd fight an old, powerless native with no knowledge of the future for 16 episodes. It was truly embarrassing for time travelers. But at least they were on a ship, unlike Gotham. She didn't have overwhelming power, so she kept a low profile. Thinking back, it seemed Vandal had been captured quite effortlessly. Since they could win with or without her, why bother being the villain? Everyone, take your seats. Gideon. Set coordinates, London, 2166, Rip Hunter, without waiting for anyone to object, arbitrarily skipped the discussion, turning the original proposal into the final plan. Thea was completely dazed. How many people on board wouldn't object? She curled her lips. What a disorganized, undisciplined bunch, with no strategy or coordination. She'd just joined them for a bit, figure out the whereabouts of the staff of Horus, and then retreat. The thought of the staff made her depressed. This cunning AI was now silent on the subject, its message clear: she had to join the main force, collect a few kills, and prove her loyalty by getting a little bloody before it would tell her. Thea exhaled deeply and settled into her chair, ready to wait for the ship to pass through the time tunnel. Everyone, take your seats, we're off, Rip declared forcefully, but no one paid him any attention. Everyone sat in their chairs, their eyes closed, stoic. It seemed they weren't used to this kind of journey either. Sia glanced at the others from the corner of her eye. No one was optimistic about this so-called time travel. The oldest, the portly old man, was already sweating. She didn't know if this journey tested her mental strength or her endurance. Sia believed she possessed both. She watched them with a slightly amused air. You just gossiped about me, I'll just watch now. I won't say anything, but as the ship sailed deeper into time, Sia's amusement faded. The feeling was indescribable. She felt as if every cell in her body was rapidly expanding. What was going on? Sia struggled to endure the pain, turning to look at the people around her. While their expressions weren't great either, they weren't as bad as mine. Take the portly old man, for example. His expression was just a cut on his hand, but why did she feel like she'd been stabbed? Something was wrong. She endured it with great effort, each second passing by in an agonizingly long time. Despite the excruciating pain, her strong mental strength stubbornly supported her, preventing her from passing out. You, the portly old man beside her nearly dropped his glasses when he saw her strange behavior. He pointed at her with a trembling finger, stammering, unable to speak. Just as Thea was about to ask him what was wrong with her, she realized the spaceship had crashed through a thin wall, instantly increasing the strain on her body. She could faintly hear Rip Hunter mutter, "We've arrived in 2166. This is the final battle, ours." Oh my god. Before he could finish his words, Thea felt a surge of energy surging from the depths of her soul. Countless dazzling lights filled her body, bathing her blood vessels, bones, lymph, and cells in a vast white vision. The countless energies instantly overwhelmed her remaining resistance, and she completely passed out. Chapter 158. Arthas and Thea. Merlyn. Time seemed to last forever. She didn't know how long it had passed before she heard someone calling her from her confused state of mind. The voice was soft and beautiful, but the tone wasn't particularly kind. "Pighead, wake up. You big idiot, you're going to die if you don't wake up. Who dares to call me that? Do you want to die?" Xia opened her eyes dazedly, her vision unfocused. It took her a while to see who was slapping her. Who is this guy? He had a fair face, and he was wearing a robe with a hint of retro style. He was tall, with long legs, light eyebrows, and silver hair. Silver hair? Are there still people who are so immature these days to dye their hair white? Glancing at the man's chest, Xia saw two small dumplings, not big, but they looked well-shaped. She moved her lips and her speech function was not affected at all. "Sister, who are you?" An expression similar to the word appeared on the silver-haired woman's face. She grabbed her collar and shook her angrily. "Fuck you, you don't even recognize me." "It's me." Xia was confused by her. Could it be someone she knew? She looked carefully, recalled carefully, and confirmed repeatedly. "Who are you? And where is this? You are so stupid. This is a consciousness space. I am Arthas. Do you remember?" the silver-haired woman said a little embarrassedly, covering her forehead with one hand. "Arthas?" Thea's first reaction was, have I been transported to World of Warcraft again? Just as she was wondering if her mage system was compatible with Dalaran, she suddenly realized the word the woman had mentioned earlier, consciousness space. Since it was a consciousness space, it definitely wasn't a time travel, and the identity of the silver-haired woman in front of her was immediately clear. "Arthas? That silly, cute creature," Thea said, gesturing with her right hand as if she were standing on all fours. Arthas's face darkened. "Your gesture is like a turtle, right? I can see part of your thoughts. Don't think I don't know what you're thinking. PFFT, 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 huh?" Thea recognized this signature gesture. Sure enough, she was my adorable pet. But how could she be so adorable when she was little? By the way, how did you grow up? Didn't you have to be exposed to the sun for a long time? Thea felt a little wronged. No one would associate this silver-haired beauty with a newly weaned unicorn. There's a limit to one's imagination. You're the one suffering from the sunburn, not the dead pig. Arthas's face darkened at the mention of the word sunburn, the veins on his forehead throbbed, and he whispered, eyelids drooping, "As for how I grew up, I don't know." Thea looked around. Was this really a consciousness realm? It was a vast expanse of white, just as she'd imagined, but what was she doing here? "How did I get in here?" she asked, naturally, the silver-haired Arthas. "You didn't summon me, how would I know?" Arthas, transformed into a unicorn beauty for unknown reasons, said angrily. Thea stared at her for a long time. Her eyes sparkled, reminiscent of her childhood. But back then, Thea would just toss some food over, but now she had nothing on hand. Could it be that she could conjure food through her imagination? For some reason, Thea felt so hungry, but no matter how she imagined it, no food appeared. Could my consciousness realm be fake? What are you imagining? This isn't a dream, you're so stupid. A voice as clear as a silver bell echoed behind them. The pure white space seemed stained with a layer of black ink, constantly converging and merging, eventually merging into one. A tall woman draped in black veil slowly emerged from the space. Xia frowned at the newcomer. She knew her, for aside from the black hair and eyes, she looked identical. Despite some suspicion, she cautiously asked, "Who are you?" The woman in the black veil blushed, her cold lips twitching. "You've done so many outrageous things with me, and yet you're asking me who I am." Xia quickly shook her head. "Wasn't it to test you, your limits?" She pondered for a long time, unable to come up with a year and could only vaguely answer. The beautiful unicorn and the woman in the black veil stood on opposite sides, clearly disapproving of each other. It became clear to Xia, that confused unicorn, that this was a bloodline-imprinted dimension, not Xia's own consciousness. Technically, she was the guest, and these two were the hosts. Arthas knew her, but the new woman in the black veil deserved a name. Hello or hey wouldn't work, especially since seeing someone who looked just like her in an unfamiliar environment made him a little nervous. "What should I call you?" The woman in the black veil breathed a sigh of relief at her awkward diversion, regaining some of her composure. With a charming smile, she said, "You can call me Thea." After a pause, seeing her startled expression, she smugly replied, "Thea Merlyn, you?" You made up a name, Thea raged. You dare to steal my name? Do you still think you can get away with it? Call me this name when you become self-aware. You'll know it automatically. The woman in the black veil, Thea Merlyn, replied nonchalantly, giving the unicorn across from her a middle finger. Arthas, undeterred, flashed her flawless teeth, her hands making a strangling gesture. Thea was scratching her head. Their relationship was quite harmonious. If she weren't here, they might have already started fighting. Her bloodline talent was very strange. Light and darkness, the sunny unicorn and the dark shadow. The unicorn could be seen as the kind side of the Quinn family, and the shadow represented Malcolm's evil side. Or perhaps the unicorn represented Thea Quinn's original warrior personality, and the shadow represented the path of a mage that the accidental fusion time traveler had taken. The same starting point, different choices, different results. This matter couldn't be pondered too closely. There were more and more things that could be interpreted. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was terrifying when you think about it carefully. Fortunately, both powers were hers now, and there was no either-or situation. He interrupted the two beasts, who were about to fight. Stop it. Can someone explain to me why you suddenly grew up, and how am I going to get out? Arthas, who was pinching Thea Merlyn's neck, said with full energy. I'll tell you later. I'm telling you, I know a lot. Black Thea, who was at a disadvantage, did not show any weakness. She rammed her little bun with her knee, and her other two hands were scratching and clawing, while her mouth was not idle. I'm a great wizard, I know everything about the situation here, I'll tell you after I get rid of her. Chapter 159. Time is also light? Shia looked at the two clowns with a frown on her face. Had she thought too much before? There might not be any secrets here. These two guys were just here to cause trouble for her. She didn't even know what was going on outside, and the two guys were just playing around. Yes, Xia felt that they were just playing. In this space, any extraordinary strength could not be used. The two of them were fighting like shrews. You kick me, I slap you. Seeing that the black-clad Xia's face was swollen from Arthas's big mouth, a black light flashed in the space, and the injury healed instantly. In a place like this where you can regenerate full health on the spot, such a painless fight is nothing but playing. Seeing that they showed no signs of stopping, Xia hurried over to pull them apart. Because she felt that she was getting hungrier and hungrier. Could it be that their injuries were draining her energy? Xia, who read a lot, automatically thought of this conclusion. If she let them fight for a while longer, she would not die. Stop, stop. Thea had just pulled the two apart when Arthas took advantage of her back to him and kicked Thea in black hard again, then ran away triumphantly on his own. You bastard. You actually helped her beat me. Thea in black bypassed her and continued to chase Arthas. Oh my god, God, please help me. Thea roared to the sky, what a sin I had done in my previous life to have these two people. Then the three of them entered the stage of pursuit. Sometimes Arthas was in the lead, Thea in black was chasing, and Thea was persuading at the end. Sometimes Thea in black took the advantage and ran in front, Arthas was chasing after her with saliva spitting, and Thea continued to persuade her from the back. After a cascade of repetitive conversations, intimidation, bribery, and talk about life and dreams, Thea painstakingly managed to appease the two deities. In the process, she signed a slew of unequal treaties, promising to buy Arthas treats and stop demanding Hesha play unspeakable games. Alright, stop it. Thea felt like a kindergarten teacher, managing two seemingly mature, yet incredibly childish children. Through coaxing and deceit, she finally managed to calm the situation. Damn, after all this running around, the hunger was getting worse. I had to get out. Hesitation struck her. Arthas didn't seem trustworthy. She thought it was better to ask Hesha. After all, she bore the name of a great wizard, so she should know more. Tell me, what's going on? He asked, pointing at Hesha. The words were spoken with such authority that if they were written on a wall in a police uniform, it would have been even more impressive. Hesha rolled her eyes. Our consciousnesses are connected. I know what you're thinking. You have a wild imagination. Facing Thea's embarrassed expression, he continued, if I'm not mistaken, it's your journey through the time vortex that has led to the current situation. Our strengthening condition is illumination, and broadly speaking, time is also a form of light. For you, it may have been just a moment, but for us, it's been 150 years. Because of our unexpected growth, a huge amount of energy has accumulated within you. Before that energy got out of control, your subconscious pulled you into this dimension, Do you understand? Heksha said, raising her chin and rolling her eyes at Arthas in the distance. Time is also light? What kind of theory is this? Although Thea was confused, she didn't want to dwell on these theoretical questions. She just wanted to get out of here. Then how do I get out? It's easy to get out. Just focus your mind. But, your energy is about to get out of control. Have you thought about that? The look in Heksha's eyes when she looked at her original body seemed to say, you're about to die. Come and beg me. Xia, who valued life and death so much, didn't hesitate at all. She hugged Heksha and burst into tears. Her acting skills were so strong that even Arthas, who was not far away, was stunned. The clone was also shocked by the original's shamelessness. He said in a low voice, you can merge with that big guy over there to release excess energy. He struggled to break free from the original's arms and raised his middle finger at Arthas. You have to maintain your own identity, otherwise you will be led astray by her second personality when you merge. After saying that, he disappeared from sight like smoke without waiting for her to reply. Will personalities become the same? I really don't know, Thea thought, rubbing her chin. This bloodline talent held quite a few secrets, but there was no time to dwell on it. With a hint of suspicion, she turned to look at the ocean horse. Arthas didn't wait for her to ask, reciting the key points in rapid succession. Thea memorized it quickly, and after reciting it without issue, she quickly left this strange space. Her consciousness returned to her body, and she was instantly dazzled by the intense light filling the ship. Even with her light-absorbing constitution, she found it glaring, let alone the others. Gideon, Sken. What the hell is this? Rip Hunter was still struggling to find the cause. He had come to Vandal Savage with a resolve to fight him to the death, and now, upon entering his home, something like this had happened. He was frantic with anxiety. Gideon's voice was noticeably slower than usual, and in a tone of near death, he explained that the energy field within the ship was too strong, and his scan line couldn't even get close, being assimilated. He had no idea what was going on. Even the all-powerful AI couldn't figure it out, leaving Rip Hunter completely bewildered. Captain, this looks like a nuclear fission reaction. Is there something wrong with some device on board? As the foremost expert in the nuclear energy world, the portly old man felt like he was about to get burned. Remember, he was the other half of Firestorm, a formidable force capable of absorbing the heat directly from a nuclear reactor. Now he was feeling the drastic change in heat energy, so one could only imagine how intense this energy overflow must have been. Rip was even more devastated. My ship is all futuristic technology, right? How could it be powered by nuclear energy? But at least it was a direction to look for. Gideon, report the damage to the ship. The AI was quick this time. Captain, the power room is 17% damaged. The quantum neural chipset is severely damaged and will soon enter manual mode. The propulsion room is unclear. Mr. Jackson is advised to inspect it. Also, Gideon rattled off a long stream, as if the ship was about to explode. Before Rip Hunter could despair, he changed his tone and asked, Captain, I have good news and bad news. Bad news? The veteran driver, no, the veteran captain, who had a personal experience with his own AI, was prepared for the worst. The bad news is that due to the energy overflow, our ship has been removed from its cloaking state. The moment we appeared, Vandal Savage had already spotted us. Not bad. Rip could accept that result. Being spotted didn't matter, his ship was about to explode. Between dying unnoticed or ascending to heaven in public, most people would choose the latter. Chapter 160 Fusion. Amidst a blazing white light, Captain Cold, suppressing his discomfort, shouted at the top of his lungs, So, what's the good news? The good news is that the light is so bright that the Vandal army can't target us. We've escaped their encirclement. However, if we don't find the source of the light, we'll definitely be caught up. Gideon's tone, though intended to be light-hearted, still weighed heavily on the group. The culprit, Miss Thea, had just emerged from the bloodline dimension and overheard their conversation. She had initially intended to play dumb, but things had gotten a bit out of hand. She wasn't one to shirk responsibility. Although she hadn't known about it beforehand, she admitted her fault. Apologies, everyone. It seems I caused this. I'll fix it immediately, Miss Thea. Several voices rang out simultaneously, a mix of confusion, bewilderment, and astonishment. Miss Thea, how did you do it? You have to understand that your energy reaction is far greater than a chain reactor capable of fissioning 5 tons of uranium. This defies physical principles. The portly old man sitting next to Thea, His eyes closed, rattled off the formula for converting nuclear energy into thermal energy. "Professor, please stop her flaming and flaming behavior. Our spaceship can't hold on any longer," Rip Hunter interrupted his incessant questioning, frustrated by the fat old man's indiscriminate pursuit of truth. "Look at the time. If you chat for another 2 minutes, the spaceship will be reduced to ash." Of course, Thea wouldn't be so unreliable as to chat with the old man. She had already summoned Arthas, and the two of them were engaging in their first mind-to-mind exchange, preparing for their fusion. She was different from Firestorm, the fusion of the fat old man and the black man. They were two separate entities seeking synchronization. Whether it was Arthas or the Black Thea, she was part of herself. Light didn't represent justice, nor was darkness evil. The two substances were merely manifestations of her. Ultimately, no matter who they were all herself. This fusion of her simply amplified one of her characteristics almost infinitely. Mysterious incantations cascaded from her lips. Despite the brink of death, this was magic. The attendants couldn't help but listen. But soon, they realized they couldn't understand the language at all. It was a whisper, filled with a hazy, ethereal quality. Yet, every word was distinct, as if someone were reciting in their ears. "Captain, Miss Thea appears to be emitting some kind of peculiar sound wave. This frequency seems to be generating a kind of inertial wave," Rip interrupted her before she could finish. The old captain didn't care about the underlying principle, he just wanted to get this over with quickly, so he could escape. He was hanging such a big light bulb in the sky, afraid no one would notice? Although Thea's incantations were somewhat lengthy due to her initial fusion, she wasn't completely unaware of the outside world. Gideon's relentless scientific explanation of magic nearly made her laugh. It must be that she lacked a worldview, otherwise it would have shattered to the ground. Magic, as the name suggests, is the language of the devil. Humans, one after another, bravely communicated with a demonic realm, eventually bringing this language to the material world. Countless wizards perished along the way. Some were simply bent on self-destruction, which we won't mention, but others were willing to plunge into the abyss for the sake of humanity's strength. Through their constant sacrifice, this enchanted language was finally introduced to the world, giving rise to various mages and mystics. Archmage Merlyn wasn't the original master, but he made significant contributions, as documented in the initial mystical realm assessments. The spell Thea was currently chanting was more of a refined version of the mystical art. Unlike traditional magic, the language's persuasive power was significantly reduced. Otherwise, listening so closely would have driven these men insane. "Come on, my friend." Thea extended her right hand to Arthas, and the two exchanged glances. Arthas took 2 steps back, revealing his true form. He was a full-grown unicorn, 2 meters across at the shoulders and nearly 3 meters tall. His mane was silvery white, and a 30-centimeter horn shone with a mysterious glow from its forehead. 2 pristine white wings adorned his abdomen. As he slowly retreated, his majestic form swayed in graceful lines. Thea spread his arms, and the unicorn, without hesitation, galloped forward. In that moment, time and space lost their meaning. The two could only see each other. Courage, hope, and anticipation flickered in the unicorn's eyes. Thea nodded silently, opening her heart to these noble qualities. The unicorn, as if charging from 1,000 meters away, plunged into her body, completing the final step of fusion. The immense momentum sent Thea back 2 steps unconsciously. Magic, nearly limitless magic. From the depths of her soul, her spirit, her body, the energy poured forth endlessly, the blood coursing through her veins replaced entirely by a golden, magical energy. At that moment, Thea felt she could win, no matter who faced her opponent. If her original level was set at 10, it was now 1,000. Comparing herself to the Superman she'd met before, she wondered if he'd used his full strength back then. She felt she was now stronger than him then. She might not be able to crush him, but she could certainly defeat him. For a moment, she was filled with confidence, wishing she could punch Superman, kick Cyborg, and elbow Martian Manhunter. Unfortunately, her good mood lasted only 10 seconds. Beautiful, right? Happy, right? While you can still use it, use it. The unicorn transformed into human form in her consciousness, its previous heroic aura gone, and she spoke lazily. "What do you mean?" Thea was puzzled. "We're going to be invincible soon. Why are you throwing cold water on me? You're a part of me, too. The mysteries of time are far beyond your imagination. No one can take advantage of it. You unexpectedly gained power in this time and space. If you return to your original time and space, you will be reduced to your original form. Of course, you can choose not to go back. Arthur spoke slowly, carefully weighing many words for clarity, and his tone became more serious. Going back would mean being reduced to your original form, while not going back would allow you to reign supreme here. Thea hesitated for a second before making her decision. She had to go back. Her family and friends were all there. By 2166, all the heroes would be old and dead. What a waste. Even if she was invincible, no one would appreciate her. She sighed. After all, she had enjoyed it in advance. She could bask in it after returning. She didn't know if she would ever reach this level of power again in her lifetime. Don't worry, you and I share a life together. We can live for at least 4,000 years. That instantly brought Thea back to her senses. 4,000 years? The trees on Superman's grave would have died of old age. Wonderful, beautiful. Chapter 161. The name of the fusion? Despite her wandering thoughts, she kept her hands busy, chanting spells, gradually drawing back the energy that was escaping from the surroundings. Directly drawing it back into her body was unrealistic. The energy was too violent, and without purification and extraction, she dared not easily absorb it. Captain, Miss Thea has controlled the energy source. We're saved. Gideon's tone, slightly anxious from earlier, returned to its usual calm tone. Why does it feel like everything is still white? Miss Thea, please hurry. Rip Hunter's heart was about to break. If he had known this would happen, he would never have let Thea on board. She was causing too much trouble. Thea was busy carving a magic circle. Such a huge amount of energy required an extremely advanced magic circle. The structure of the circle was based on the knowledge brought by Arthas after the fusion. She had to ponder and draw as she went along, so her speed was naturally slow. Don't worry, it'll be done soon. Who knew when it would be ready? But honestly, if she told them she was learning as she went along, they'd go crazy. To give them hope, Thea lied a little. Fortunately, as time passed, Thea and she carved two simple contraction circles, allowing some of the energy to dissipate into the atmosphere, while a small portion of the remaining energy within the spacecraft was absorbed by her. The Legends of Tomorrow team finally returned from the world of light to the normal human world. This revealed the strength of each person. The portly old man sitting next to Thea and the black young man not far away had incredibly high fire resistance, perhaps due to the firestorm. After the bright light faded, they rubbed their eyes and recovered. Kendra, the naive hawk girl, might be a weakling, but she had been a priestess of the Egyptian god Horus in a previous life. Perhaps she had enjoyed some divine remnants from her daily offerings. While these remnants had no effect on her combat effectiveness, they provided her with a high degree of resistance to various abnormalities. Hawkgirl looked around in confusion, unsure of what had happened. The others were ordinary people. The Atom had his suit with him, and immediately donned it when he noticed something was wrong. He activated his thermo-optical sensor transmission system, ion mass spectrometer stabilizer, and polycarbonate lenses. Thanks to a host of advanced technology, he was the first of the ordinary people to recover. The remaining few, without mutations or technological equipment, were in dire straits. Sarah and Rip Hunter were farther away, and their quick reactions meant they were less affected. The Central City criminal duo were in dire straits. They were separated from Thea by a fat old man's seat. Heatwave had a tough skin, and as an arsonist, he had some professional benefits for withstanding the heat. Although sweat was pouring down, he was at least lucid and stared at Thea with wide eyes. His comrade, Captain Cold, was in serious trouble. He was far from strong to begin with. He wore a down jacket even in the hottest days of summer, which gave him a good idea of his poor physique. Now, struck directly by this energy wave, which had no radiation or shock waves but radiated terrifying power, he was completely devastated. Heatwave was sweating profusely, trying to rid his body of excess heat. He was sweating profusely, his bodily functions nearly chaotic, his breathing shallow. And the whites of his usually lone wolf eyes were bulging out. Quick, Gideon, get the emergency room ready. Seeing his partner's plight, his best friend, Heatwave, forgot his grudge against Thea and rushed to the emergency room with Captain Cold in his arms. Thea was about to say she already had healing spells and that such injuries could be healed with a single stroke, but she knew she had gotten herself into trouble and obediently continued to squat in the corner, drawing circles. No, magic circles. Whoosh, she drew 5 more circles, finally gathering all the overflowing energy. With a little purification, she could absorb it again. After finishing her work, Thea stood up and apologized to the others. After such a huge blunder, she felt obliged to show some appreciation. Her status as Green Arrow's sister came in handy here, and despite Rip Hunter's somewhat grim expression, he reluctantly accepted her apology. Heatwave carried Captain Cold to recover from his injuries. The remaining heroes were all on the side of justice, and they were all quite generous, or perhaps even tolerant. Take the Flash, for example. Even with a massive mess he caused with Flashpoint, no one would have mentioned it, and no hero would have threatened to kill him as a sacrifice. If a different villain had caused this, the battle would have already been going on for 5 minutes. So, being on the side of justice is still very effective. As long as you're on the same side, everyone's tolerance is exceptionally high. This also has to do with Thea's energy attributes: sunshine, light. She sounds like a friend of justice. This is a misconception caused by the narrow-minded European and American worldview, which believes that light is justice and darkness is evil. If Superman spent his days lying in a cemetery absorbing evil spirits, let alone doing good deeds, no matter how many good deeds he did, he would be condemned by a large number of righteous people. These people tend to judge everything through their own fixed logic. What agrees with their own understanding is right, and what disagrees is wrong. Thea couldn't comment on these universal values, but as someone with vested interests, she wouldn't offer explanations. "Thea, what's that outfit? And your hair?" Sarah Lance asked, noticing something strange the moment she regained her sight. The rest of the group looked over. "Huh? Why did you change so quickly?" "Armor?" They all saw Thea transformed. Her original red Kevlar had vanished into nowhere. Her attire was now dominated by a golden and red hue. The most striking feature were the shoulder pads, each clad in gold and lined with red satin. Mystical runes occasionally appeared on the surface, and 2 small swords were embedded directly above each shoulder. Her arm guards and chest guard were also golden, creating a dignified and majestic look. Her leg armor was a red base, adorned with the golden leaves, unlike traditional chainmail. The legend's expressions varied, but their gazes held the same message: is it really okay for you to wear such traditional, yet fantastical, armor on this sci-fi ship? They could see something was wrong, and Thea, as the person involved, had naturally noticed it a long time ago. This somewhat cool armor, according to Arthas's original words, was given away for free. It would be automatically put on when the fusion was completed, and would disappear when the fusion was released. Originally, Arthas had suggested that since they were fused, the name should also be combined, right? How about calling it Surthas? Thea spit in her face. "Fuck you, my name is so catchy, Surthas. Shouldn't it be Sylvanus in a few days? Are you cursing me to death?" She flatly rejected this name that could easily cause misunderstanding. The protagonist's costume is based on the T2 suit of the human female knight in WoW. The protagonist will not change to knight. I wrote this paragraph just to reminisce about my youth. I have always liked the look of female knights. It's a pity that I was from the Horde back then. Chapter 162 Captain Cold's Ability. It's not impossible for the subject to refuse, but blindly resisting will easily reduce the synchronization between the two parties, so Thea had to make some compromises. Take, for example, the long silver-white cape that trailed behind her. Long cape, long cape. It's important to say it 3 times. Despite some reluctance, she could only helplessly declare loudly that she, too, was a hero with a cape. Honestly, the cape was quite beautiful, a cross between a divine robe and a navy coat from One Piece. On the back, countless golden threads depicted a soaring unicorn. Thea had once secretly taken a look and it was quite good. The painting style was realistic, majestic and powerful. She would rather die than wear one of those cute, spitting portraits. Actually, this is our family crest. It's similar to the fusion of Professor Stein and the others. I merged with some creature to become what I am now, Thea said, showing them the pattern on the cape. Believe it or not, that's the answer. When the group saw the unicorn, the preconceived notions of right and wrong resurfaced. A unicorn. A legendary beast, needless to say, on the good side. You, Thea, are a true friend. We believe it. Thea wiped the non-existent beads of sweat from her forehead, finally explaining it. This was just a unicorn. If it had been a giant octopus, they would have been questioning her for 10 minutes. Seeing she was alright, Rip Hunter carefully instructed the black man and the fat old man to inspect the damage. Thea's mistake had been quite severe, and the ship's interior was fragile, as evidenced by the silence of the usually chatty Gideon. While they waited for their inspection, the heat wave pushed Captain Cold back. Of course, his injuries weren't fatal. Captain Cold simply suffered from cell loss from frequent exposure to freezing radiation as a normal human, and this time, Thea's immense heat source had left him dehydrated. It was a blessing in disguise. This intense radiation eliminated more than half of the frozen radiation that had accumulated in his body over the years, and many damaged cells regained vitality. Naturally, he couldn't curse after receiving such a great benefit. He also felt he couldn't defeat Thea. Weakly, he sat down at his seat, closed his eyes, and waited for Rip's instructions. His physical condition could be hidden from others, but not Thea. After the fusion, her mental power was nearly limitless, and she could sense any changes within her field of vision. A casual glance surprised Thea, as she observed more closely. Captain Cold's cells and the remaining frozen radiation had actually fused slightly due to her external intervention. She lowered her head and thought for a moment, then walked over to him and composed her words. Your cells. Before she could finish, she was interrupted by a heat wave from the side. Get out of here. Oh, Thea was getting angry. You're going on and on. I'm giving you a hard time, aren't I? Her once pretty face paled instantly. What did you say? I didn't hear you. Say it again. As she grew angry, visible ripples formed around them, and floating objects were constantly trapped in the air. The air seemed to condense at this moment. Captain, magnetic reaction in the air. Gideon's voice emerged from an unknown corner, but was rudely interrupted by Thea. Shut up. Thea remained silent, simply staring coldly at Heatwave. She was now invincible. Even the artificial intelligence, Vandal Savage, and the entire group combined were no match for her. Heatwave was no fool. Although she was a little frightened by the noise she made, he had one strength, his tenacity. He stared at her without a shred of weakness, his message clear, you can kill me at worst, but I'm not going to bow down to you. Thea, stop. Sarah hurried over to hold them together, but it was mainly Rathia who was the main concern. Heatwave, while refusing to admit defeat, wasn't about to charge forward. His eyes widened, but he didn't move a step. Thea was very impressed by Sarah's future achievements, so she had to give her some face. She nodded, ignoring the gritting teeth of Heatwave, and said to Captain Cold beside her, you should check carefully. There are some problems with a gene chain in your body. If nothing unexpected happens, you will soon become a superpower. After saying that, without waiting for his reply, she walked to the site and sat down. What? Captain Cold was a little confused. He was already top-heavy. Just now, his best friend wanted to fight with Thea, but he winked at Sarah, which stopped the fight that could have been over in a second. Now you suddenly tell me that I'm going to have a son? No, I have superpowers? He wanted to ask in detail, but Thea ignored him and walked away on her own. Captain Cold had no choice but to seek help from others. Gideon, the only person with the most information on the entire ship, was this sinister artificial intelligence. Mr. Snart, what Miss Thea said is indeed correct. Your genetic chain is undergoing some kind of abnormality. The database doesn't have the specific information. Sorry, oh my god, it doesn't understand what I'm saying, does it? Captain Cold could only continue to look at the others. Counting the heads, he realized that none of his crew members truly understood such advanced knowledge. He could only glance at Sarah, with whom he'd recently struck a chord, and gesture towards Thea with his chin. The message was simple, there's someone who knows something. Can you ask her for me? Sarah hesitated at Captain Cold's glance. She wasn't sure how much her reputation was worth with Thea. After all, this Thea was so different from the one she'd remembered. After much deliberation, she decided to ask. One more question wouldn't hurt anyone. As she took 2 steps, Thea's words reached them clearly. There are 2 options. One is to use time and wait for the gene chain to stabilize automatically. This will take about 3 years. The other is for me to irradiate him with high energy, intense light to accelerate the fusion of cells and the freezing radiation, but this will reduce his lifespan. You decide. Sarah and Captain Cold exchanged glances, their heads bowed in thought. Before they could make up their minds, Rip Hunter interrupted them. Miss Thea, you're not going to use that intense light again, are you? Upon receiving a positive response, the old captain nearly fainted. Are you kidding me? My ship is going to be scrapped, but outright refusal wouldn't be appropriate. Captain Cold, Heatwave, and Sarah were all crucial combat forces. Captain Cold and Sarah were among the best in the team. The rest of the team wasn't nearly as reliable. The two scientists were idiots. The black guy was a car mechanic 6 months ago, and Hawkgirl was washing dishes in a cafe 6 months ago. Superpower, what a high-sounding term. If he tried to stop them, it would not only be a matter of being friends, but these people would really turn against him. Rip Hunter could only dissuade them in a roundabout way. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163 Vandal Savage's Cruelty. Well, you see, shouldn't we evade Vandal Savage's pursuers first? Land on the ground, then investigate your affairs. No one objected to his words. Captain Cold also had to consider whether exchanging an uncertain lifespan for the supernatural powers he could acquire in due time was worth it. We need to capture Vandal Savage at the rally tonight. Miss Thea, do you have any suggestions? Rip, having just finished assigning the task, remembered the presence of a powerful god nearby and hurriedly asked with a smile. Thea was now growing increasingly fed up with these people who had no supernatural powers but had managed to live for such a long time. It was a complete waste of food. This Vandal was no match for a ninja master. He'd lived for 4,000 years, and all he knew was a throwing knife. She felt like she could crush him with a single breath. The power gap was so vast that no strategy would be of any use. But Thea was still brooding on Gideon's trick. She could just go over and kill the enemy in a flash, while they'd pick off their heads and get their gear? How could it be that easy? But then she thought, returning to her original form and being reduced to her original form, it would be unfair for her to not fight back with such powerful power. A surge of fighting spirit washed away any resentment. I'll go with you, Thea said calmly, but her tone was firm, not a negotiation. Veteran Captain Rip Hunter couldn't wait for her to come along, and without a word of objection, he finalized the plan. In the evening, Rip arrived at the venue with Sarah, Heatwave, and Thea, a maxed-out character. While Thea's Yang Mark power was slightly weakened by the night, her total energy base was so vast that she didn't mind even a tiny bit. Captain Cold was about to join the charge, but Thea's cold remark, "Don't touch the freeze gun," instantly deterred him. Before leaving, Rip Hunter tried to get some Vandal Guard uniforms to blend in, but Thea stopped him. No need to bother, his right hand instantly swung several mysterious spells. Several beams of transparent light fell upon the three men. They looked at each other, felt their bodies, and didn't notice any changes. Darkness can make you invisible, and so can sunlight. My spell is working on you, continuously absorbing light. No one but us can see you. Seeing their bewildered expressions, Thea briefly explained, sighing inwardly that it was difficult for them to switch so suddenly from science to magic. Rip Hunter, a bit skeptical, ran back to the spaceship and had Gideon scan it with various beams. The result was devastating. The spot where he stood was empty. Whether he accepted it or not, the truth was there. He had no choice but to temporarily abandon his efforts to save the worldview and focus on taking down Vandal. His return trip delayed them a bit, and the three of them ran to the meeting point. Yes, three of them. Miss Thea was now leisurely soaring through the sky. She had two methods of flight. One was using unicorn wings, but that image looked a bit like Hawkman and Hawkgirl. The other was using her own immense energy to lift her body for rapid movement. The second method, while a bit more grueling, was incredibly visually appealing. Thea even struck a classic Superman pose, soaring through the air. The after images left by her super speed formed a V shape, then a straight line. So cool. No wonder Superman and Supergirl seemed so high up in the clouds. Happiness is born from comparison. Compared to the three breathless runners on the ground, their sense of superiority was palpable. Seeing how hard they were running, Thea raised her hand and cast Wind Walk on them. After a flurry of thuds and clangs, the group, all of them agile, quickly adapted to the incredible speed and finally arrived at the venue on time. We stand on the brink of history. Past victories are certainly memorable, but only by winning the final battle that lies ahead will you be remembered. For victory. For immortality, Vandal Savage delivered a hysterical speech on the stage. A large crowd of people in black helmets and black clothes raised their right arms like mad fans, loudly echoing him. If they hadn't shouted "Hail Hydra," Thea would have thought she'd come to the wrong set. But the scene looked remarkably like Red Skull's mobilization speech. Such a similarity could only mean they were all using the same textbook. Vandal wasn't hard to spot. Not to mention the 500-word mobilization speech he'd just delivered. Just remember that so many people were dressed in black, rifles slung over their backs, and only one man and one woman stood in the front with their faces exposed. Vandal was a priest, and considering his unrequited love for Hawkgirl, the woman was automatically excluded. While ancient Egypt was relatively open, with no problem for men and women, they weren't so liberal with the gods. Two priestesses hanging out together, wouldn't the gods be furious? And let them reincarnate 206 times? He was dreaming. Is this bearded man the target? Thea whispered to Rip Hunter. The old captain's eyes were filled with hatred. He pursed his lips, saying nothing but a nod. Then I'll take him down. You wait. Thea observed him for a long time, unable to discern what was so formidable about him. Even in her normal state, she could defeat him. He probably relied on his immortality to secure his place among villains. You, Rip began to say, but Thea had already broken the sound barrier and charged at Vandal, striking him with a powerful punch. Fearing she might kill him with too much force, she used only 10% of her strength. Vandal, after all his years, was truly experienced. His brain barely reacted, his body already tumbling in the same place. Thea's probing punch pierced the guard behind him. The guard stared in amazement at the gaping hole in his chest, falling to the ground without a single grunt. Only after he lay on the ground did the wound begin to bleed profusely. Go! Vandal grabbed the woman's hand, then pulled out a remote and pressed it hard. Boom! Boom! The continuous explosions distracted Thea. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the previously bustling square suddenly transformed into a living hell. A torrent of rubble and broken limbs was blasted into the sky, and raging flames converged on the area from all directions. What was going on? Could this guy see through her magic? Had he spotted Rip and the others? But Thea soon realized that this guy had seen nothing. He was following superhero logic and betting that he would save others, even former enemies. He had hit the jackpot, and it turned out to be a lucky gamble. The heat wave didn't matter, Sarah and Rip had to be saved. Chapter 164 Breaking the Door. Thea could only glare at him with disdain and quickly fly back. Vandal, brimming with laughter, thought he had a plan. He flicked a nearby switch, revealing a hidden passageway. He hurriedly dragged the woman inside. Heatwave and Rip were easy to find, but Sarah was small, and the scene was chaotic. Thea searched for 3 full minutes before spotting her amidst the huddled masses. Quickly, she pulled her out and sniffed for breath. She was still breathing. After getting all 3 to a safe area, Thea was at a loss as to what to do. This guy was incredibly decisive. With so many loyal men present, he'd just abandoned them. Or perhaps he'd anticipated Rip and the others' arrival and planted a massive amount of explosives beforehand. Otherwise, it didn't make sense why he'd planted explosives under his loyal men's feet. No matter how eccentric his mindset was, he couldn't do such a thing. Chase, Rip, morale was actually quite high. He ordered Heatwave to transport the unconscious Sarah back to the spaceship for treatment, while he followed Thea to find Vandal. Thea was speechless as Rip pulled out the small pistol. You're just seeing how good I am, and you want me to help you defeat the boss? Your acting is a bit exaggerated, and you're being too enthusiastic. But she wasn't afraid now. The sooner the better, the sooner they could get home. Both experienced, they returned to the spot where Vandal had disappeared and began searching. The switch for the secret door was quickly found, but when they flipped it, they saw a massive metal door. I can't find any locks on it. This door is a one-time lock. It closes once and can never be opened again. Thea continued to probe with magic. There was no combination lock, fingerprint lock, or pupil lock. It was just a single-piece metal door, always open, closing at a critical moment. The entire door could only be used once. This guy's brain was truly different. Had he spent the past 4,000 years figuring out how to escape? Blow up all his men to create a disposable door? Who in their right mind would have such an idea? Rip Hunter fumbled with the door for a long time, then said uncertainly, it's cast entirely from a composite metal, boron nitride and a large amount of osmium. He turned to Thea, can you break it? It's the strongest alloy in the 22nd century. Frustrated, Thea flew around the entire site twice. While she didn't have superhuman clairvoyance, her magical senses allowed her to estimate the direction and layout of the underground passage. Her observations were impressive. For some unknown reason, this vandal had hollowed out the entire underground chamber. The outer layer was thick rock, the inner layer was a metal Thea couldn't identify, and the innermost layer was entirely made of the same material as the door itself. "This is just a turtle shell." Xia told Rip about the observation results. "Do you have weapons on your spacecraft that can penetrate here?" Rip immediately contacted the Waverider, but the result was disappointing. Gideon's original words were that theoretically it could be penetrated, but they were being chased and beaten by a giant emerald green robot that was more than 200 meters tall. "So, you should find a way to solve it yourself first." The handsome old captain spread his hands, indicating that he had tried his best, "and the rest depends on you, heroine." Xia breathed a sigh of relief. What she was looking forward to was a hearty battle. Not to demolish houses here. She could only contact Arthas, who was sleeping in the consciousness space. Hey, don't sleep. We only have armor when we merge together? Do you have your own weapons, sister? I'm a unicorn, not a lion or tiger. I'm a beast of peace. My only weapon is the horn, but now our fusion is not enough, and you can't use it." Arthas spoke these words after gaining a general understanding of the situation. The two had previously discussed the degree of fusion she mentioned. A so-called deep fusion meant that Thea would completely accept her values and perspectives, which Thea found unbearable. She didn't want to become a sunny, innocent, and righteous person, she simply wanted to be herself. Breaking down the door with bare hands wasn't impossible, but it would seem foolish. She didn't have a body of steel, so such a rough job wouldn't be possible. Some technical skills were needed. While light-attributed combat wasn't common, it wasn't unheard of. Thea immediately thought of Admiral Kizaru's powerful aim no Murakumo sword. She placed her left hand on her right wrist, continuously channeling the light elements within her body into her hand. With this massive concentration of energy, Thea compressed it twice more. The originally transparent ball of light gradually turned golden, even emitting a faint arc of electricity. Almost there, another compression would cause it to explode. Seeing her progress, Thea stopped, gently stroking the ball of light with her left hand and simultaneously stretching both hands to the sides. In less than 30 seconds, a dazzling longsword was complete. After waving it twice, it seemed a little light. Fortunately, it was only used temporarily, so I didn't bother to consider the weight. "Captain, stay away." With these words, Thea sped off into the distance. After about 2 kilometers, she felt she had reached her goal. She turned, lightsaber raised high, and charged at the metal door. Just as a massive sonic boom erupted, she charged forward, stabbing the door with her sword. The earth shook, and the entire land trembled with the force of her impact. The lightsaber broke instantly, but the impact still inflicted immense damage on the door. The previously smooth, solid structure had been punctured by her force, creating a crater 2 meters in diameter and half a meter deep. Thea rubbed her head and stood up, carefully examining her work. She came to a single conclusion: the door was incredibly thick. Could it be that its thickness was the same as its length and width? She surveyed the 3 meter by 3 meter metal door, a look of barely concealed distress in her eyes. Never mind. This suicidal collision was a bit dangerous. Let's just keep digging. He gathered another aim no Kirakumo sword, and this time, without a running start, he simply stood still and dug deeper into the hole he had just made. Unbeknownst to her, she was deeply depressed here, and Vandal Savage, hiding in his shell, was even more despairing. This bunker had originally been designed by his most brilliant civil engineers, and it had been built with the vast resources and manpower of the city, the cost being incalculable. But Thea's strike had just shaken his supposedly impenetrable refuge, instantly shattering his once solid confidence. He couldn't hide the sound of Thea digging without stopping. He checked the real-time monitoring system on the indoor computer and saw that the metal door had been damaged by 45%. It looked like the enemy was about to break in. He had encountered such a formidable foe in his 4,000 years, but as far as he knew, those superheroes were probably dead by old age. Where had this guy come from today? Chapter 165: The Descendants. As Thea's movements quickened, so did his anxiety. With a fierce glare, he surveyed the few nearby staff members. With lightning speed, he whipped out his throwing knives, and with a few muffled puffs, he dispatched everyone in the room except himself and the woman beside him. "Father, what are you doing?" the woman asked, bewildered, of the father she once adored. Vandal approached, gave her a loving embrace, whispering in her ear, "Daughter, I'm sorry." His gaze quickly shifted from tenderness to fierceness, and he plunged a strangely patterned dagger into her abdomen, twisting it twice. Why?" She collapsed in a pool of blood, bewildered. "I didn't intend this to be your fate," Vandal said, closing his eyes and turning his back on his adoring daughter. After a moment, he regained his composure. He pulled an unconscious young man from a basement compartment. If the legends were here, they would surely recognize him as the recently deceased Hawkman, Hawkgirl's reincarnated lover. For the time-traveling legends, only a few months had passed. But for Vandal, it felt like a solid century. He had painstakingly found this young man, the 207th incarnation of Hawkman, 30 years earlier. Listening to the increasingly clear vibrations outside the door, he no longer hesitated. He dipped his head in his daughter's blood and carved an intricate magic circle on the ground. Time ticked by, and Vandal's daughter passed away. The blood flowing from her body turned from bright red to dark red. Finally, when the blood had almost coagulated, he finished the circle. He panted heavily, the circle consuming his entire mind and energy, leaving no room for error. Even with his 4,000 years of experience, he drew it with trepidation. Fortunately, he finally completed it successfully. "Blood of the beloved," Vandal whispered, and as his voice reached the circle, the pattern drawn in blood instantly came alive, with flashes of light flickering through it. Thea, still digging outside, immediately noticed something was amiss. Something was terribly wrong. The air was filled with a restless atmosphere, and the birds on the nearby branches had already taken off en masse. "Should we continue digging or wait and see?" Thea consulted Rip Hunter. Although Rip felt nothing, the two quickly agreed. A gentleman should not stand under a dangerous wall. "Let's stay away and wait and see. What if the enemy resorted to some mutually destructive tactic? How dangerous. At worst, we could just travel through time again. What a big deal." Vandal couldn't care less about the powerful enemy's escape. His ritual had already entered its second phase. The blood of loved ones, the lives of sworn enemies, all contributed to the balance. Vandal Savage, High Priest of Horus, begged the gaze of my lord. A full 10 minutes passed. Just as Vandal felt the ritual begin to drain his immortal life force, a mysterious force finally projected a nearly omnipresent gaze from the depths of the multiverse. The gaze was so ethereal and faint, almost between existence and non-existence, that it barely conveyed a signal to Vandal, a mixture of praise and encouragement. Vandal was practically succumbing to exhaustion, his vitality draining away. This was just him. Any ordinary person would have perished long ago. He cursed internally. "I haven't used it in 4,000 years, and summoning you this first time is such a struggle. Are you even capable?" But the arrow was on the string, and he had to shoot. He trembled as he completed the final step of the ritual. He reached out a hand to his left eye, his heart filled with hesitation. Matters involving the gods were no small matter. If he sacrificed it, even if he were reborn, it wouldn't grow back. His hesitation was immediately sensed by the gaze, and the message it conveyed grew increasingly impatient and dissatisfied. Gritting his teeth and stamping his foot, Vandal gouged out his left eye. The excruciating pain nearly knocked him unconscious, but he retained some sense and tossed the bloody eye into the magic circle. "Sacrifice my eye and pray to the Pharaoh's patron, the symbol of royal authority, the eye of the heavens and the universe, the eagle god Horus, to descend. Destroy these fugitives of time, destroyers of world order." Vandal's last words were practically a roar. There was no way around it. He was too frail. His face, once 40, now looked 80. He had maintained his 40-year-old appearance for 4,000 years, unchanged. Now, a single ritual had drained his nearly limitless vitality. Add to that the loss of an eye and a daughter, his sacrifice was truly immense. Thea, naturally, was unaware of his sacrifice, and even if she had, she wouldn't have taken it seriously, for she was already a little stunned. The sky and the earth echoed with an ancient charm, and the faint sound of an eagle's cry lingered in everyone's mind. Rip Hunter of the Church of Scientology also saw that things were escalating, but he didn't know what it meant, so he could only ask Thea, who seemed to know more. If it were any other question, Thea wouldn't have been able to answer. The fusion only gave her some additional knowledge about unicorns, inherited through her bloodline. Not only was the knowledge limited, but it was also quite specialized. But Thea could still recognize the current scene. Unicorns, the representatives of the celestial realm, were something she'd never seen or heard of before. Facing Rip Hunter's inquiring gaze, she gritted her teeth and said, a little distressed, This is a sign of the coming of the gods. Clatter. Rip Hunter could only hear the sound of his worldview shattering. Are you kidding me? It's 2166, and we're already using space-based weapons. And you're talking about gods? Aren't we in a technological age? Wasn't everything I learned in elementary school fake? His inner cries were unknown, and no one cared. Thea stared solemnly at the distant sky. The clouds there were shrouded in a dense energy, the air rubbing violently and producing massive arcs of electricity. Just as the energy gathered, finally reaching a peak, a pair of sharp claws suddenly thrust out. Though laborious and slow, the claws, like tearing something, finally tore a gaping hole through the energy ball. Miss Thea, are we? Rip Hunter received a message from the Wave Rider. The Atom, at the cost of serious injury, had eliminated the large robot sent by Vandal. The ship was rapidly approaching, preparing for a strategic shift. Thea wasn't so anxious. After repeated comparisons and assessments, she concluded that if this deity was only at this level, she wouldn't necessarily fear it. Deity sounds nice, but in essence, it simply means a life form far superior to that of ordinary humans, hence the title of God. In terms of life form, Thea was now half human, half celestial, certainly inferior to him, but she wasn't afraid of him. Chapter 166, The Descent of the Gods, Part 2. The god's pressure had some effect on her, but it wasn't overwhelming. Compared to Rip Hunter, whose lips trembled and his speech was stammering, Thea's performance was a testament to her strength. Captain, capture Vandal Savage. He's down there, defenseless. As for this big guy, leave it to me, Thea smiled after she finished speaking. It wasn't some joke she'd remembered, but a surge of excitement. A smile filled her with fighting spirit, her blood boiling. Finally, she had a worthy opponent, a genuine god. A good fight, and even returning to her original time and space would be a win without regrets. The unicorn sensed her overwhelming fighting spirit and proactively released some of its control, boosting Thea's aura even further. Rip Hunter knew his 2 moves wouldn't be enough to stop her and him. If you want to fight, go ahead. I'll capture Vandal first, he commanded the Wave Rider to breach the gate, successfully blasting it open after just a few shots. He ordered the Atom, Sarah, and Captain Cold, the 3 seriously injured, to stay at home. The remaining Firestorm and Heatwave Hawkgirl followed him to capture Old Man Vandal. The cumulus clouds in the sky grew heavier. Despite the claw's full-strength attack, they were ineffective. He no longer cared about the majesty of the gods. A long, hairy leg stretched out from space and began to push outward with his hands and feet. Of course, Thea couldn't just stand by and watch. The villain could do whatever he wanted. She wasn't that stupid. Yes, she believed she was justice, and the enemy was naturally the villain. She thought so and acted accordingly. After communicating with the unicorn, the original unicorn pattern on the back of her cape was replaced by 2 large Chinese characters, Justice, anyone who opposed him was a bad person or evil god. Run over and kick the enemy back? After thinking it over, she gave up the tempting idea. The enemy's strength was unknown. If they dragged her into it, she would have nowhere to cry. Since she couldn't fight in close combat, she'd use ranged combat. While Thea, now adorned with golden armor and helmet, looked like a paladin, that was all appearance. A unicorn, however powerful, was still a magically inclined fantasy creature, its sole strength being its immense magic. Decrune set Argus Akasha, Thea unleashed the most powerful spell from the unicorn's memory. Not only did she employ hand gestures, but the incantation itself was much longer than before. As the magical energy gathered around her, the scene fell into absolute silence. She and Horace, who was about to cross over, were like 2 whirlpools, each frantically absorbing the magical energy from the air. Horace, no ordinary warrior, sensed his own danger and pressed harder against the opening. A small portion of his falcon-like head emerged. His right eye blazed with brilliance, revealing the divine wisdom of the sea, while his left, filled with hatred and fury, glared fiercely at Thea. Though it was just a glance, Thea, now infinitely more powerful, instantly understood what had happened. Horace's left eye was once circulated among the world, later crafted into the sacred artifact, the Eye of Horus. He personally retrieved this artifact and offered it to Osiris, the god of the underworld, for safekeeping. Now, his right eye is the primary eye of his divine form, and his left eye is likely the sacrifice for Vandal. Could his right eye also be used to craft sacred artifacts? It's no wonder Thea wondered. His eye seemed to see through everything in the world, truly alluring. Something that even the god of the underworld would admire must be superior to scepters and orbs. No matter how the battle unfolded, he must keep his eye. At worst, he could just grab it and run away. As for Vandal, he would keep his. Thea, fearing she would have nightmares watching his fierce gaze, thought she might be in for a nightmare. After 3 minutes of chanting, the spell was finally complete. Perhaps due to the technological limitations of this world, spellcasting was extremely clumsy, otherwise, even Thea wouldn't have struggled so much on her first try. Cloud burning, pointing at Horus's figure from afar, a vast cloud of fiery red energy instantly enveloped the god, who was struggling to escape. A vast amount of heat and light energy converged within the cloud, producing countless explosions every second. The energy from these explosions wouldn't dissipate, instead regrouping within the sealed cloud and exploding again. Theoretically, this energy could continue to gather, explode, and re-explode, and the enemy's injuries would only increase its destructive power. While the cloud appeared impenetrable to the outside world, Thea, the spellcaster, could see inside. This deity's reasoning was unknown. Was it simply boredom? Focused solely on escaping this path, oblivious to the explosions before him, a faint veil of light enveloped his body. Though so weak that it seemed a puff of wind could blow it away, he managed to persevere through the relentless blasts. Amazing. As expected, spells are significantly less effective against gods. This is a memory passed down through Merlyn's bloodline. His ancestors likely did something similar to Thea's today. It's truly a fine family tradition. Since a surface attack can't penetrate you, let's try some inflicting damage. As modern beings, steeped in modern science, our minds are much more dynamic than those of the ancients. This time, no elaborate spells were needed, it was a pure battle of energy. Thea gathered all her light energy between her fingers, repeatedly compressing it, then pointed her fingers together at Horus, who was still acting as a target. Magic light cannon. Well, Thea thought this move was very similar to a certain popular comic book villain's move. The principle was similar, so she simply borrowed the name. The spiraling energy continuously accelerated the main energy beam. Initially, due to the excessive concentration of energy, the speed was slow, but with continued acceleration, it grew faster and faster. The distance between Thea and Horus was a full 2 kilometers, but this distance, driven by the spiraling energy at an extremely high speed, practically broke the barrier of space. Puff, the energy beam tore a small hole in Horus's body, the thickness of an adult's finger. While this wasn't a serious injury to Horus, who stood 5 or 6 meters tall, being injured by a mortal was a bit too much for him. His eagle-like head roared in an unknown language, and his entire body began to expand violently, as if trying to force his way in. Oh my god, I'm only going to take a little blood from him, is there really a need for a violent outburst? Thea wasn't lying. It was just a drop of blood, a golden drop of blood, flowing from his wound. The wound healed quickly, repairing itself in an instant. But the drop fell uncontrollably to the ground. The blood of a god. Thea was tempted by the spot it landed. This was usually the foundation for a protagonist's rise to power, especially since it was her own trophy. But it would be beneath her dignity to rush over like a dog to its prey. After all, she was now a rival of his level. Even if the gods might not acknowledge it, we should outwardly despise him but inwardly respect him. Memorizing the spot where the blood landed, Thea continued firing. Puff, 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 3 rounds in a row. Thea was exhausted, and Horus, the target, was even more exhausted. Chapter 167, The Descent of the Gods, Part 3. Shia no longer had time to focus on the Divine Blood's landing point. They must have been in the same area. The two engaged in mid-air combat, and the Earth's rotation wasn't that fast. Huff, huff, she gasped. The massive energy drain, coupled with the mental strain, had reduced her combat power by at least 15%. After these concentrated bursts of fire, she realized she couldn't stop the deity from entering. Her strength wasn't yet at the level to slaughter a god like a dog. She could only show limited concern for its determined attempt to force its way in. She lightly stroked a spell, summoning an owl, indicating several distant landing points. She couldn't let the divine blood go to random passers-by. There were countless such tropes in novels, 2 max-level characters engaged in a shattering battle, both severely injured, and the protagonist's level 1 alt character then rushed in to take advantage. Xiao wasn't so selfless. She didn't care about people from 2008, let alone those from 2166. She'd be furious if anyone dared to compete with her. Silently pausing in mid-air to recover her strength, she decided to face this deity in a fair and square battle. Fortunately, Horus was busy and didn't use his telepathic powers, otherwise he would have lashed out at her. You made 4 holes in me, are they fake? Unlike human blood, which gushed forth like a fountain, divine blood couldn't create such a scene. Every drop was extremely precious, some even affecting a deity's position and ministry. In a sense, it was a crucial indicator of a deity's combat effectiveness. Losing too much blood could even lead to a deity's fall from power, resulting in the permanent destruction. Seeing Thea silently gathering her strength, preparing for a fair and square fight, Horus thought she was preparing a powerful move. Although he despised humans, he also knew he was a target. The woman in the golden helmet and armor across from him could easily wear him down. He was unaware that Vandal, being pursued like a dog by Rip Hunter, was secretly resentful of the priest's incompetence. Seeing the gods in such a difficult situation, they offered no further support. He knew that if he could just recover a little more strength, he could escape this resting place of the gods and enter the material world. Filled with resentment, he finally resolved to sever the connection with his original habitat and force his way through. With a roar, Horus's divine power circulated relentlessly, his already enlarged body expanding even further. Visible ripples erupted in all directions, and the sky, land, and oceans felt an inexplicable tremor. Countless eagles and falcons around the world soared to the heavens, countless signs indicating that a true god had returned to the world after experiencing the twilight of the gods. Thea, of course, could also witness these marvels. Her reaction was simply wow. The background music was nothing, the special effects for this entrance were truly moving. My name is Horus, son of Osiris and Isis, patron god of Letopolis. I administer justice and law in the world. You should bask in the glory of the gods and their supreme sovereignty. Pay homage to me. This is the gift of the gods, the sole contribution of your humble lives. Thea had been waiting to see this man, who hadn't started a fight, but had instead introduced himself and recounted his entire ancestry. But when he mentioned homage, the humble being grew a little displeased. Was he being indirect? It sounded as if the true god was here, and when would you worship him? Hey, Birdman, we live in a democracy now. Your sovereignty was gone 4,000 years ago. Thea didn't dare get too close. She didn't know what kind of attacks he had, but judging by his bird-like head, no, eagle-like head, she could roughly guess he was fast. Horus, standing 10 meters tall, swarthy, with an eagle's head, shirtless, and wrapped in a linen sheet, was stunned by her words and couldn't help but ask, is the 4th dynasty over? Thea nodded, thinking to herself, great God, you're absolutely right. Not only did the Ming dynasty fall, but the Qing dynasty too. Horus, visibly stunned by his own answer, surveyed his surroundings. His divine consciousness swept across tens of thousands of kilometers, tracing back thousands of years of human civilization and accumulated knowledge. He shook his massive eagle head with a hint of dissatisfaction, as if the world's development had somewhat exceeded his expectations. Are you the mightiest among humans? Are you worthy to rest beneath my throne? Kneel and accept my blessing. This is an honor you can only imagine. Horus, understanding the dynamics of the world's changes, felt a moment of confusion. He couldn't quite tell whether some of these changes were good or bad, but he was a god. The world could only adapt to him, not accept him. Though slightly annoyed by Thea, a time traveler capable of injuring him, he was already preparing to recruit and continue building his kingdom on Earth. He considered humans impossibly weak, and his condescending attempts to win them over would surely yield. As for why Vandal had summoned him, he paid no mind. Gods could command humans, but how could humans command gods? He dismissed Vandal's wishes without a second thought. Thea was amused by his indignation. What was he saying? The Chancellor was so generous, but this god was even more so, willing to recruit him without a second thought? Come on, we haven't even fought yet, how could I surrender so easily? And where did you learn that sing-song voice? It gave Thea goosebumps. After repeated investigations, Thea couldn't believe this god was truly powerful. Aside from his impressive appearance and sing-song voice, there seemed to be nothing special about him. In pure energy intensity, Thea had the upper hand. This creature looked formidable, but Thea felt as if it had been severely injured, summoned into battle without even recovering. Game data revealed that this creature's health and mana were both incredibly high, but now their health was dwindling, and their mana had nearly plummeted to the bottom. Compared to Thea, who was at full health and mana, a clash between the two was a foregone conclusion. Thea didn't bother to engage in idle conversation, the two couldn't even communicate. She mobilized all her mana, gathering momentum, ready to challenge this creature. Her sudden surge of aura surprised Horus. Shouldn't this person be kneeling and kowtow? Why was he acting like he was ready to fight? Your Majesty, have already forgiven you, so why are you so stubborn? Although puzzled, the god's majesty could not be violated, and he disdained explanations. If you want to fight, then so be it. Thea could see he was incredibly weak, and he knew it even better. Having been awakened from eternal slumber, he was in a terrible state. Even if ordinary priests used the correct procedures, they could only attract his attention. Their own abilities were simply not enough to guide him into this world. Fortunately, Vandal Savage wasn't from the first shift, but from the third. By frantically draining Vandal's immortal life force, Horus, after untold hardships, finally entered this world once teeming with the footprints of the gods. Chapter 168 Miracle. Horus's divine power had been severely depleted, leaving many of his more intensive abilities unactivated. He wondered if his remaining priests, after 4,000 years, had long been dazzled by the prosperity of the world. Vandal, now unsteady on his feet, cursed him inwardly. Hurry up, you've come to this. Rip Hunter kicked Vandal, urging him to quicken his pace. The old captain experienced both joy and sorrow today. Initially, Thea's artificial nuclear bomb nearly destroyed his ship, that was sorrow. Now, he had easily captured his greatest enemy, that was joy. He showed no concern for Vandal's advanced age, not even needing a ticket to board. He showed no regard for the elderly, dragging and beating him back to the ship like sheep. The ship quickly took off, having no choice but to ascend. Horus, standing 10 meters tall, towered over the ground like an iron tower. Thea hovered at the same height, staring at him with battle intent. The two could clash at any moment. The ground was too dangerous. Is this a god? The Atom, battered from his earlier battle with the giant robot, had just regained some strength. Hearing the news of a god's arrival, Kendra, the Hawk Girl, supported him to the display screen to pause and watch. This was unseen even in Star City in 2017. He gazed at the towering and majestic Horus with a certain amusement. Perhaps it was a coincidence, or perhaps his gaze was too obscene. From a distance of tens of thousands of meters, separated by the ship's display screen, Horus's true eagle eye swiftly glanced at him, a glint of divine power in its gaze. Ray Palmer was a pure, ordinary man. While tall and handsome, these were useless against divine power. Even with so many obstacles between them, the moment his gaze landed on him, he was instantly and severely wounded. Puff, a mouthful of blood spurted out, and he collapsed straight down. What are you looking at? Thea, unaware that her makeshift teammate had taken a hit for her, seized Horus's momentary distraction. This creature's divine body was too resistant to magic, and the magical light cannon took too long to prepare. Thea had no choice but to fall back on her old tricks, lightsaber in hand. Thankfully, this wasn't a game. There wouldn't be any such thing as warriors being unable to use magic or mages being unable to engage in melee combat. Thea, unfazed by the thought of charging headfirst into the fray as a mage, grasped the nearly 2-meter-long Aim-no-Kyum sword with both hands and lunged. Horus, perhaps initially concerned for the god's dignity, blocked several of her strikes with his bare hands. His overconfidence resulted in 2 more punctures. In desperation, he pulled from thin air a golden scepter, its crown adorned with an eagle, wings spread wide, ready to take flight. Horus's scepter, Thea's gaze was drawn to it, but upon closer inspection, a hint of confusion lingered. The scepter was over 8 meters long, and Horus wielded it with such ferocity that it seemed impenetrable. Was that the same weapon Vandal had originally wielded? He was 5 feet 80, wielding an 8-foot 1-meter-long staff? The scene seemed a bit contrived. Artifacts could grow or shrink, Thea believed, but could Horus shrink his own weapon specifically for humanity? His arrogance spoke volumes. Once again, Thea used her swift movement to strike Horus with a powerful blow. Horus, gripping his staff tightly with both hands, thrust it in the opposite direction. With a crackle, both men exerted near full force. The result was that Thea's sword and Horus' staff shattered simultaneously, the lightsaber shattering into mirrored fragments, while the staff snapped in half, falling to the ground and melting into the dirt. Hey, Thea understood. This man's staff, like her own lightsaber, was a counterfeit, crafted from his own energy. Without her weapon, she quickly withdrew. Refocusing her lightsaber took seconds, while Horus's staff could be summoned at will. Thea's energy control was far inferior to those of these gods, who had lived for countless years. Powerful men of humanity, do you wish to see the distance between you and the heavens? Do you wish to know how shallow you are? Let me show you the authority of the gods. Horus did not attack. His divine power began to spread in all directions. Wherever it passed, tall buildings collapsed instantly, asphalt roads broke apart. The once modern, high-tech city was transformed into a sea of sand in the blink of an eye, with waves of sand rolling in from time to time, some reaching heights of 100 meters. Most of the city's residents were dazed, their modern clothing replaced by linen shirts and skirts. The few who remained conscious watched the scene in confusion, imagining it was some kind of prank. How could there be so many foolish mortals? Humph! Horus was furious with those who still retained consciousness. He instantly sent out countless messages. Those under his control, their strength surging, formed groups of 3 or 5 and knocked the conscious citizens to the ground. Occasionally, a few would be swept away by the divine power while semi-conscious, but most of the conscious citizens were beaten to death. Oh my God! Thea watched helplessly as the city turned into a sea of sand. The former inner river became an oasis, and countless low-rise buildings rose from the ground. The remaining citizens, shirtless and wrapped in sheets, knelt and kowtowed before Horus. Was that too much? Thea watched in horror as a building slowly rose from the ground in the heart of this so-called city. It was a pyramid of unprecedented magnitude. As it rose, the crowd around it erupted in ecstasy, many shedding tears of excitement. See? This is the power of the gods. Change at the fundamental level of things. This is a realm you cannot tread. Horus exulted at the fruits of his labor, a genuine joy. This was more like it. Those chaotic skyscrapers were just too much? Wouldn't humans living 100 meters above the ground be looking down upon a god like them? This was unnatural. Thea had indeed witnessed his so-called power of transformation. Cities transformed into seas of sand, rivers into oases. Given time, that could be accomplished. It was nothing more than a few terrain-changing spells. Turning citizens into idiots could also be accomplished with mass suggestion. But the transformations of some animals alarmed her. She watched as dogs transformed into camels, kittens into leopards. These weren't superficial transformations, they were fundamental shifts she couldn't achieve. Not to mention the pyramids that continued to rise. How had he transformed from invisible to visible? These questions puzzled Thea. She was ready to retreat. Returning to her own timeline or continuing to hang out with the legends was preferable to fighting this inhuman. A mental scan quickly located Rip Hunter and his companions high in the sky, preparing to teleport directly onto the spaceship. It was time for a new strategic shift. Chapter 169. Be careful, I'm going big. Miss Thea, these people, we need to save them. Right, Captain. Rip Hunter hadn't said anything when the righteous old man next to him spoke up. Martin Stein, who had grown up under the banner of freedom and democracy and lived for nearly 70 years, couldn't accept this brainwashing of normal people into slavery. His lips trembled with anger. He turned to Rip Hunter and asked, "You brought us together to save the world, didn't you? You're not planning on running away, are you?" Rip Hunter, sporting a handsome mustache, didn't want to get involved. He just wanted to get his wife and son aboard. What happened to the world after that was none of his business. But now the old man looked at him with hope, and he felt helpless. This was the pain of a neutral person pretending to be righteous. Thea had been forced aboard the Waverider by various moral principles, and he felt the same way now. She couldn't think of a reason to refuse. "Of course, that's what I meant," Rip Hunter could only pretend. "Miss Thea, do you have any ideas?" The fat old man unified the internal opinions and began to question Miss Thea, the current main force in fighting monsters. What could she do? These citizens had been completely rewritten from the bottom of their hearts. Their original beliefs and ideals in life had now been forcibly erased by divine power. To put it clichédly, even if these people were saved, they would have to rebuild their outlook on life and the world. Me too. Thea was still trying to figure out how to say retreat in a tactful way. Arthas interrupted her in her mind. "Thea, we can't retreat. These humans need our help." The unicorn, which symbolized her kind side, asked her to continue fighting in a very childish way. Thea was also a little helpless. She was in a fused state now. Without a unified mind, her outer body wouldn't move a step. "Sister, we can't defeat them, okay? This god is serious, and we're not from this world either," This guy isn't as strong as you think. His divine power is completely depleted, and there's very little left. Deeply merge with me. I'm a divine being, and I have some divine power too. It's not as profound as the mind he controls, but when you add in our magic power, our total is much greater. Arthas, never forgetting his deep fusion with her, kept bringing it up to her, and Thea, now a bit bewildered by power, fell for it. Should she give up her human integrity? On one hand, there's the divine experience, and on the other, there's the silly talk. It seems like an easy choice. Can I undo this fusion at any time? Thea was afraid that once merged, she'd never be able to separate. If she had to fight criminals like a fool every day, she'd go crazy. Of course, I'm you too, or a part of you. We're one. You can accept or reject it, okay? How do we do it? Thea finally made up her mind. Let the world experience the fire of justice. Eh? Thea stared in amazement at the bright silver helmet that fell into her hands, a single gleaming horn nestled in its center. Did she really want to put it on? And where did this overwhelming sense of the Lich King wearing the helmet come from? By the way, is there really no harm in wearing this? Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up. That god has already started marshalling his troops. Thea sighed, hoping the embarrassment wouldn't be too great. Buzz, the moment she donned the helmet, Thea's senses instantly stilled, a myriad of vivid emotions flooding her mind. There was the warmth of family, the support of a loved one, the growth of her children, the tranquility of an elderly man in his 70s. Beautiful thoughts welled up in her heart, from the depths of her soul. I can do this. No matter what thorns lie ahead, I can sever them. I am Circe. Donning the helmet, Thea automatically acquired a wisp of divinity. Though faint and insignificant, sometimes, with certain qualities, the difference between possessing and not possessing them can be profound. You evil god. You disregard the will of the world. Today, I will judge you. Radiating golden light, Circe stood in mid-air like the sun, pointing at Taurus. Though his voice was low, it could be heard clearly by everyone within a 1,000-mile radius. The legendary squad, their temporary companions, naturally also within that radius, exchanged bewildered glances. This is unrealistic. How can I hear her from so far away? Though he didn't wait for Thea's direct response, the portly old man, Martin Stein, was pleased with her actions. He figured this young woman was likely a man of action, not good with words. She was truly a good person, a true friend of justice. Thea's large-scale broadcast had naturally unleashed his scientific spirit, and he searched for various theorems, attempting to explain this supernatural phenomenon with science. Sarah Lance, who had mostly recovered by then, also rushed to the monitor, feeling a bit frustrated and even more bewildered. This Thea was a world away from the one she knew. Her voice was so powerful it could carry 1,000 miles, even a ninja master like Damien Dark wouldn't be a match for her. Thea, whose power had been soaring, was now locked in a battle with Arthas and her bloodline consciousness. Shut up, stop talking. Don't run. Stop right there. The two of them fought and chased each other, and Thea finally regained some control. She couldn't avoid some of the Chunyabaku, but she could keep quiet. She'd have to fight it out with her fists. She couldn't restore these people to normalcy, but she could brainwash them once more. Using the divine energy within her body as a foundation, supplemented by a vast amount of magic power, Thea began to tap into the memories deep within her bloodline, the legendary final resting place of King Arthur, the sacred place of Celtic mythology, the central faith of the ancient Druids. The ultimate paradise, a legendary island between reality and fantasy, Avalon, the land of the afterlife and the afterlife, as passed down through the ages and ages. Of course, to pull all the imaginary lands, scattered to who knows what dimensional corners in this time and space, into this world would require a vast amount of divine power, not to mention her own. Even Zeus would have to bring a host of other gods along. This world, which completely rejects magical power, is so stubborn that even a deity as powerful as Horus struggled to squeeze in. Furthermore, the vast distance meant she couldn't even pull in a single brick from Jinsakayo. But if she couldn't bring in physical objects, she could use her bloodline to pull in a projection of this imaginary land. Avalon's attributes naturally lean towards the realm of illusion and dream, giving it an innate advantage over the likes of Mount Heaven's oak forest in terms of projection. Thea pointed to a nearby lake and began to transform the ley lines. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Jinsakayo arrives. Avalon is a dreamlike island, demanding extremely strict requirements for a realistic environment. Primarily, it cannot touch the ground. Therefore, Thea had to artificially create a vast floating island to receive projections transmitted from distant time and space. Her earthwork was a significant undertaking. Horus was a true god, yet his power was meager, so every bit of it had to be carefully calculated. Through exquisite manipulation, the transformation process could be described as seamless and painstaking. Thea lacked this skill, using a lower-grade magic power, and her control was far inferior. The result was a construction site-like affair. Fortunately, her magic power was inexhaustible. What she lacked in quality, she made up for in quantity. A torrent of violent magic surged into the earth, sending mud and dust flying through the air. She had carved out a vast expanse of land, 30 kilometers long from east to west and 15 kilometers wide from north to south, totaling over 200 square kilometers, to create a floating island. Vast swathes of lake water and trees fell from the sky, sending mud, sand, and rock scattering. Thea's work was considerable. As she prepared to counterattack, she glanced in Horus' direction, surprised but understandable. Horus held humans in the highest regard. Even Thea's strengths were mere ants in his eyes. How could a god's pride lead him to undeclared war? The Lord God showed no intention of a surprise attack. He watched her dig and build the island, nodding thoughtfully. Okay, if you're not in a hurry, I won't rush either. Thea compacted the entire outer edge of the floating island, lest the immense magical reaction from Avalon's arrival shake the load-bearing soil apart. Everything was ready, only the east wind was needed. Thea chanted the incantation, and this time it seemed to stretch out even longer. The air was filled with silence, her voice the only audible voice between heaven and earth. Boom! The initial sound was faint, but as time wore on, the vibrations grew in frequency. Even the pyramid Horus had erected was shaken, sending torrents of mud and sand tumbling from its sides. Many brainwashed former citizens, terrified by the invisible aura, looked around in bewilderment. Even as Horus's enormous eagle eyes surveyed them, return. Avalon, the bronze misty island, the land of eternal fantasy, Thea shouted, her magic surging wildly. Visible ripples of azure energy rippled around them. The sound of a harp drifted in, mingling with the faint hum of a banshee. The once bare floating island seemed shrouded in a hazy atmosphere, its interior obscured. Only through occasional gaps in the mist could one glimpse a glimpse of the interior, forests, lakes, and, at the deepest point, an ethereal palace. The people aboard the ship were utterly stunned. No science could explain this phenomenon. Seriously wounded by the eye of God, the atom, possessing a bit of a cockroach quality, received some treatment in the infirmary, watching the battle from the front lines while still wounded. Watching the massive island Thea summoned on the screen, a die-hard Knights of the Round Table fan, he was completely bewildered. Even if he didn't know what it was, Thea had called it out, even via a regional announcement. Avalon, Ray Palmer muttered softly, his heart filled with the excitement of meeting his idol. Captain and everyone, I need your help against this evil deity. Thea's voice reached the ship at the perfect moment. Her words were righteous and affable, a level even Superman could muster. In every sense, she was a righteous representative and savior of human freedom. I'll help, Jackson, let's go. The portly old man, steeped in liberal and democratic ideals, felt a surge of mission upon hearing they were about to take on the evil deity. He was the first to respond, turning to his partner. The black guy was actually a bit scared. It was practically the end of the world. Remember, just 6 months ago he was still repairing cars. Such thrilling scenes were only seen in dreams. But seeing the fat old man's resolute expression, he knew if he refused, he could just jump out with a parachute and rifle, so he could only nod. The two merged into the superhero firestorm. Without even saying goodbye to Rip Hunter, he flew out the hatch. I'm going to help too. The Atom immediately donned his suit. Ray, are you injured? Hawkgirl called out. It's okay. My suit has life support. I'll be fine. Hugging Hawkgirl, he followed Firestorm out. Whether he was doing this for a just cause or to see his childhood idol was a matter of opinion. Ray, Hawkgirl gave chase, but couldn't catch up, so she returned to the command room. She found Sarah Lance watching her. Send me down, I'm going to help too. This was the frustration of ordinary heroes without superpowers or technological equipment. They had to rely on others for help. Rip Hunter played dead again, and the team dispersed. He said sheepishly, "We're all going. We're legends." The villain duo hadn't been consulted, and they didn't object. It was an honor to experience such an epic battle firsthand. It was indeed epic. Horus had already formed a phalanx of infantry and summoned numerous fantastical creatures. Several 3-meter-tall eagle-headed giants, resembling himself, lingered behind the ranks. On Thea's side, a large group of knights emerged from the swamps, woods, and mists, each bearing gleaming armor and a variety of weapons, longswords, short axes, and chain hammers. They both chose this fighting style. Horus relied on his control, Thea on her vast magical power. Both were brimming with confidence. "How can we help? Just tell me." The legends arrived at Thea's side one after the other. To protect their necks, Thea descended from midair. Upon hearing their demands for battle, she lowered her head and thought, "Honestly, the only ones here with any real strength left to show for themselves are Firestorm and the Atom. The others can only manage to defeat ordinary people, but they were nowhere near qualified to participate in this kind of divine war." "Horus, who are you? What kind of divine war is this?" He glanced at Ray Palmer, who, oblivious to his own injuries, stared intently at the knight emerging from the woods, carefully identifying him. "What can you even see?" Thea was speechless at his actions. These were projections, they could only make out the general outline of a figure. If they teleported a real person, the amount of magic power expended would be completely disproportionate to the figure's actual strength. An ordinary medieval knight would probably be no match for Sarah, so what was the point? He pointed at the Atom, and bursts of white light surged. "I'll suppress your injuries for now. Go back and heal." After 10 seconds, there was no response. Thea clutched her head, he hadn't heard. She couldn't dampen their support. So Thea pondered for a moment. "How about each of you play a Knight of the Round Table? I'll project their souls onto you." Before they could react, the previously dazed Atom suddenly perked up. "Really? I can do this, too, why wouldn't he?" After all, the Atom was the second person to support her, and he came with a serious injury. Such a spirit was truly invaluable. Thea pondered for a moment, then drew a cloud of black mist from the forest, pointing it at Lei. "Night Gawain is you." Chapter 171 Close Combat. Before Lei could comprehend what was happening, a cloud of black mist sprayed all over his face. Soon, the mist dissipated, revealing him as the same person, but the frivolous, playful look in his eyes had faded considerably. His back, slightly hunched from years of research, straightened, his spirits transformed. Lei stood there, flexing his limbs. Soon, his face filled with excitement, he exclaimed, "I can use a sword. I can even wield a spear." "Haha," Thea facepalmed. He was still the same witty, and Thea understood his excitement. Consider it a bonus. If Lei were in the game right now, he'd surely be rewarded with a ton of cold weapon proficiency tips. This quirky guy was so fascinated by the Knights of the Round Table, so this gift must have been what the heroes had in mind. Her magic was a dual-tiered spell. The caster made an initial selection, this was the first step, and the synergy between the hero and the base character was the second. If the hero and base character didn't align well, the skills granted would be limited. It seemed Lei met the criteria for Knight Gawain. Both were princes on white horses, tall and handsome, so their attributes should be a good match. "Do you need it?" Xia looked at the others. What a great effect. They could acquire so many skills in an instant. She was jealous. But as expected, they rejected this kind of initiation. According to Captain Lang, he couldn't be a knight, nor did he want to be one. Xiao's eyes swept over their faces. It was true that these guys, or rather, it was rare for modern people to possess the qualities of a knight. As people have more knowledge, they naturally lack awe. The 10-meter-tall giant on the opposite side, who used his halo to brainwash them, probably thought the same. Huh? Xiao was stunned when she suddenly saw the eagle girl in the team. "You? Don't you feel any discomfort?" It didn't make sense. She was a priestess of Horus, probably the only priest in the world besides Vandal. She should have flown to the other side long ago. Why wasn't she summoned? This didn't conform to the principle of divine power. Stunned by her sudden change in expression, Hawkgirl Kendra took a moment to grasp her meaning. She lowered her head and thought, uncertainly saying, it sounded like a voice was saying something, but it was too quiet. "I thought I was just getting angry." What's going on? Hawkgirl was already a little afraid of Thea, and now Thea's commanding words about slaying gods and saints terrified her, a woman who had been washing dishes in a cafe 6 months earlier. She strained her brain to come up with an answer, cautiously whispering, fearing she wouldn't be satisfied. Initially, Thea was bewildered, but when she heard her voice was too quiet, she instantly understood. Horus still valued this believer and had summoned her immediately. Unfortunately, she was too weak to hear the divine command, and nothing further unfolded. It ended at the first step. Truly a fool's luck, a weak person escaped disaster, Thea lamented. Comparing the current situation of Vandal, who summoned him into the world, reveals that he is not exactly friendly to his followers. Or perhaps the gods' concept of good and evil differs from ours, and they believe brainwashing you is for your own good. Why should you resist? I absorbed some of your life force in order to enter this world. Isn't that your sole purpose? There's no basis for discussion between the two sides. It would be strange if they didn't engage in combat. Professor, follow me and attack the evil god. Captain, command the ship's weapons to support us. Regardless of whether the other party admits it or not, they simply label him an evil god. Although Thea knows he's actually neutral and still some distance from evil, this is the consistent strategy of the righteous side. The rest of you, join the battle on the ground. For the freedom and democratic will of mankind, defeat this evil god. May there be eternal peace and no more conflict from today. After saying this, Thea expended a large amount of magic power to cast a light return spell on each member of the legendary team. Upon receiving fatal damage, they would instantly teleport back to the original casting point, which was Thea's side. A bird's eye view at this moment would reveal the earth bisected. Horus on the eastern side was an army composed of brainwashed citizens. Dressed in retro attire, shirtless, the chaotic formations included a mix of archers, spearmen, swordsmen, and even several galloping chariots pulled by 2 horses. Thea's side was much more organized. Her magic power was plentiful, but her control was limited. She wouldn't dare summon King Arthur, who would obey her. The knights were vastly outnumbered, but their formations were rigorous and orderly. The chivalrous Ray, imitating Theoden's pre-battle mobilization from the Lord of the Rings, galloped before the battle with his sword in hand. But Thea didn't look like he was ready for a fight to the death. Was he just kidding? Are you ready? Are you ready to accept your inevitable defeat? Horus' voice rang out from afar. Thank you for giving me time to prepare. I will win. I represent justice. I represent freedom. Humanity is not the slave of the gods, Thea practically roared at the end. I admire your conviction, but it's meaningless, Horus said, not waiting for a reply, and began to channel his divine power. Desert, raise your sands and blot out the sun's rays. The sand sea on Horus's side began to boil violently, vast swathes of yellow sand being hurled thousands of meters into the air, rising ever higher until a blanket of sand covered the entire sky. Hundreds of gigantic, obsidian hawk-headed figures, marching in unison, led the charge. The controlled citizens followed closely behind, clashing their weapons against their shields. Hey, this god has some foresight. Knowing I draw my power from the sun, he's trying to cut off my source first. Nice idea, but how is that even possible? Thea silently channeled her magical powers, soaring 10,000 meters into the air. Wind spirits of the sky, earth spirits of the earth, creatures of the sea, free will of the world, heed my call. Let light and justice protect this continent. Let the glimmer of humanity illuminate this dark night. Let this world be bathed in light once more. The massive outpouring of magical energy brought countless elemental creatures charging out from all directions, assaulting the towering hawk-headed figures. Kill, Ray Palmer, wearing a knight's armor but concealing a metal battlesuit, led the charge. The remaining knights also received the signal and formed into the usual wedge formation, charging into the opposing infantry phalanx. Neither player made any further moves, their minds focused on the battlefield below. This was a struggle of strength, but also a struggle of faith. Miss Thea, aren't the casualties a bit high? Firestorm flew over to her and asked softly. Thea glanced at them. They looked quite strong, even flying at an altitude of 10,000 meters. War is always mortal, and only a fat old man could say such childish things. In fact, it didn't matter if Thea's side died, they were all magical illusions, and they could just recruit more. But the other side couldn't do that. Dead was dead. Chapter 172. What is this summoning? The two watched helplessly as Ray Palmer dodged 2 javelins and, with a counterattack, Rip the enemy's head apart with a chain hammer. Professor Stein, don't worry. Look to the side. I need Ray and the others to help me break the situation. Only then can this unit be used. Following her finger, Firestorm saw some green figures. What are they? These are the Banshees from Lake Avalon. They can help these people regain their sanity. Thea had long anticipated the fat old man's arrival and had already arranged an ambush. As for regaining sanity, that was pure nonsense. His original personality had been forcibly erased by divine power. Not only could a mage like her, but even Horace couldn't restore it. Thea had no intention of restoring it. She simply used the Banshee's ability to charm them and indoctrinate them with ideas of freedom and democracy. The fat old man was a top authority on technology, but his knowledge of magic came from stories he'd heard before he was 8 years old. Now, hearing Thea's confident narration, he felt reassured. As they spoke, many former citizens had already been brought here, again, by Thea's unscrupulous brainwashing. Thea didn't have time to compile detailed memories for them, leaving only the message that the other side was a slave system, ours was a democracy, and that the people here were stupid and rich, so come quickly. Immediately, many people, armed with spears and bows, defected to Thea's side. The situation gradually became clear. Lei charged in the front, disrupting the enemy's formation, while the weaker Banshees fought desperately in the back, seducing and brainwashing them. On the other side, the obsidian eagle-headed men fought evenly against various elemental creatures. While they were nearly immune to magic and outnumbered, it was difficult to determine the winner. Horace surveyed the battlefield with a detached gaze, his thoughts unseen. Human, you underestimate the power of the gods. His eagle eye instantly glanced at the Great Pyramid behind him. A wave emitting a mysterious radiance struck the pyramid's top, and with a resounding boom, this pyramid, unlike any human construction, collapsed instantly. Thea had naturally witnessed this. What did this mean? They were tearing down their own buildings in the midst of the battle? This fighting style is quite intriguing. Is he trying to paralyze himself? She soon realized she'd overestimated it. The Atom, who had been charging and shouting at the forefront, suddenly appeared, as if on a whim, in a flash of yellow light, approaching Thea. Of course, this didn't mean he'd become a speedster. It was his light reflection technique taking effect, meaning he'd suffered a fatal blow. What did you encounter? From too far away, she could still see the towering pyramids, but now all she could see was a dark mass on the ground. Ray Palmer was a bit startled, gasping for breath. It's beetles. Swarms of them, the largest as big as calves. Thea looked over, half convinced. Wasn't this the eagle god? Wasn't he said to have a bad relationship with the underworld? How could he summon the underworld's minions? An eagle-headed figure like Anubis could explain it, but beetles were completely unrelated to his role. But there was no time for reflection. The enemy was already charging. The previous knights were nearly annihilated, and many of those Thea had to brainwash were also overwhelmed by the swarm of insects. Thea could only organize the remaining knights to resist and evacuate the brainwashed citizens. She was now the face of justice, and she had to make good on these superficial efforts. Thea continued to cast spells. She couldn't afford to lose. She was in top form, fighting a boss with only a sliver of health. Since the enemy had already begun demolishing their own buildings, she wasn't going to hold back. Thea's entire body radiated an intensely hot light. This was the energy that powered her body's magic. Using a little are not wasted, and she didn't care about that now. She recklessly blasted this scorching sunlight onto the towering trees surrounding Jinsakayo. Immediately, the trees, already 100 meters tall, began to grow rapidly. The trees, already 100 meters tall, continuously exerted their power from their roots and branches, and the growth was visibly exploding. Some trees gradually shrugged off the earth's constraints, unsettlingly pulling their roots free. Slowly but surely, they strode out of the jungle. Fight, Thea commanded the treemen, urgently summoning a group of knights to hold off the swarm of insects while the treemen took on the eaglemen, and then the elementals dealt with the beetles. With her continuous maneuvers, the situation barely returned to equilibrium. Thea panted heavily, her forehead beaded with sweat from the sheer amount of mana she'd consumed. She glanced at Horace in the distance. How can this guy not see the drain? He's overdrawing his divine power. Don't worry. Arthas's words offered no comfort to Thea. Regardless of whether he was overdrawn, she knew we couldn't hold out. For every point of divine power the enemy used, Thea had to use 100 points of it. After so much time spent on infrastructure and pushing the enemy lines, she'd thought her limitless magic power was about to run out. The situation on the field was unclear. While the giant treemen were immensely powerful, the eagle warriors were no pushovers. The battle was earth-shaking, and the outcome was uncertain. The elementals were struggling against the endless swarm of insects, relying on repeated self-destructions to stall for time. The Atom returned to the spaceship to seek comfort from Hawkgirl. It seemed his narrow escape had shaken him deeply. Firestorm fired furiously at the beetle swarm from the air, but his damage was practically negligible against the swarm of insects that blanketed the ground. One last strike, or I'll run. Thea felt she had done her best for the free world of 2166. If she couldn't defeat them, there was nothing she could do. She could only return to fight once her power was fully developed. She desummoned all the knights on the field, finally regaining some mana. She considered replacing Avalon and all the banshees with a summoning circle, summoning even more powerful creatures. As for what kind of creatures would emerge, Thea had no idea. The tide of battle gradually turned in Thea's favor. Avalon slowly vanished, the strength of all the treemen drastically reduced, and the elementals weakened as she drained so much of their magic power. Seeing the situation desperate, the Atom once again took to the battlefield. This time, he didn't play night games, but soared into the air and launched a barrage of fire at the ground. The Wave Rider also opened fire to buy her time. The firestorm had already triggered a massive explosion, completely wiping out a layer of the insect swarm on the ground, but the effect was minimal, and it didn't hold back the beetle swarm for long. Miss Thea, hurry up. I don't know what you're doing, but we can't hold out any longer. The usually playful Atom suddenly became serious. I'll be there soon. Thea wondered what she had spent so much magic power to summon. Jinsakayo was already a huge mana consumer, and it was so difficult to summon it. Chapter 173, Dark Dragon Queen Takahasis. As she continued to pour immense amounts of magic power into her, Avalon, previously in a semi-elusive state, gradually withdrew from the main plane. First, the outer lake, then the inner forest. These areas vanished, replaced by 4 sturdy lower limbs standing on the original floating island. What was this? It looked like claws and scales, some kind of ferocious beast? Thea had no idea what she would summon. These spells are like that, they're highly random. Creatures created through energy exchange don't always adhere to the principle of equivalence. Some are more powerful than the original, while others are far less powerful. Merlyn's bloodline recalls a great wizard who, during a life-or-death battle in outer space, summoned a desolate plant from the depths of the universe. He had gone to great lengths to summon it, and initially rejoiced, believing its energy reaction could easily slay gods and demons. But it wasn't long before he died. The plant was powerful, but it couldn't move. This flaw completely thwarted the wizard. Thea felt somewhat confident. The main position held a powerful allure over all creatures, and the chances of summoning a powerful fighter were high. Avalon's glory had finally vanished from this world. Thea had no time to lament, her gaze fixed intently on her summons. Little human girl? Are you summoning me? The voice emanated from 100 meters above. Before Thea's eyes appeared a massive dragon with 5 heads, red, blue, green, black, and silver. Its scales shifted color constantly, a glow of varying attributes flickering across its body at every moment. Yes, Your Highness. May the light of your wisdom illuminate this long night, and may the order of the night break the tranquility before dawn. She spoke so politely, not because she had suddenly become polite. At that moment, Thea felt a surge of anxiety. This was a great god, one of the primary gods of another small world in a distant universe. The Dark Dragon Queen, Takahasis. Also known as the Myriad Colors returning to the Sky Dragon. Even with Jinsakayo's power, Thea couldn't summon a single deity, let alone a deity from a smaller world. Perhaps it was Jinsakayo's ethereal nature, combined with her own power of time, that allowed her summoning to pierce the vast expanse of time and space, summoning a younger version of the Myriad Colors returning to the Sky Dragon, a pre-deity. Fortunately, it was the Dark Ages, before the deification. Had a deity descended, it would have been a real disaster. All the gods of this world had been wiped out by Ragnarok, and now it's the age of mortals. Furthermore, the few capable mortals of the year 2166 have died of old age, making the power of a deity a surefire way to sweep across the land. Thea initially mistook the massive wings for a dragon and considered becoming a dragon rider, But upon discovering this woman, she instantly dismissed the idea. What a joke. Rider? A single mixed energy fireball would instantly destroy her. Luckily, the summoned Dragon Queen was a younger version, about the level of a demigod in strength and not as moody, making her at a manageable age. Another deity? No, not yet. Horus, standing nearby, naturally observed the changes and was initially startled. He had never seen the Dragon Queen before, but the aura she exuded was undeniable. After a moment's focused observation, he determined that she was merely a projection, her true form not having truly entered this world, and only in a juvenile state. But he could no longer retreat. As he charged out of his dormant place with all his might, he had no intention of returning. Feeling the Dragon Queen's overwhelming pressure, he too sought to prove his true divine authority. If Thea's magic power could be returned, his own divine power could also. Beetles continuously vanished into thin air, transforming into strands of divine power that regathered within him. Don't even think about it, Thea immediately activated a backup plan. All the elemental spirits, gleaming with different radiances, rushed into the sea of beetles and collectively exploded. Red, yellow, and blue magical energies emanated, blasting away over half of the once boundless sea of insects. Horus's divine power recovery was hindered, and he felt a little angry. He glared at Thea. This isn't fair. His implication was, you just summoned and unsummoned. Did I bother you? Where are your boundaries? Thea felt a bit like she was bullying this chivalrous deity. Normally, she wouldn't have thought so, but this time, comparing them, she realized she had indeed let her standards drop. Your Majesty, Horus, you are a god, I am a mortal. It's fair. Though she felt a little guilty, she still had to say it, but her tone was much more polite. The gracious Horus actually nodded. You're right, I misjudged you. Faced with such an honest deity, even Thea, with her thick skin, could only fathom him. She felt embarrassed to continue her nonsense. Let's see for ourselves. My queen, that's an enemy over there. While she couldn't ride, she could still give basic commands. Otherwise, it wouldn't be summoning, but rather a form of begging for mercy. The myriad colors returning to the sky dragon stared at Horus briefly, his tone tinged with disdain. A bird god? I'm dying of laughter. With that, he spread his wings, his body reaching over 1,000 meters, obscuring the sky. His 5 heads spewed energies of varying properties, fire, ice, quicksand, and deadly beams of light, hurling themselves at him. Horus faced this ferocious onslaught with a solemn expression. He frantically channeled his divine power, rapidly stretching and deforming his entire body, transforming into a gigantic eagle hundreds of meters long. He dodged the beams and fiercely clawed at the Dragon Queen. How dare you? Who do you think you're fighting? The Dragon Queen's 5 heads coordinated with exceptional skill. 3 of them unleashed fireballs, ice cones, and sandstorms to counter Horus's claws. The remaining 2 each unleashed a stream of light and dark energy, skillfully blended together. As Horus swooped down, these energies shot into his chest. Boom! A deafening explosion sent Horus flying thousands of meters. A massive hole was blown through one of his iron wings, and feathers like swords clattered to the ground. Huh? Why hasn't this guy lost any divine blood? Thea, finally able to play a supporting role, had been keeping an eye on the battle. The Dragon Queen's reputation was well deserved. Despite being a demigod, she could dominate a true god, the epitome of a superior challenge. Thea was in awe. Seeing Horus injured but no divine blood, she felt a little puzzled. She asked the unicorn, slumbering in the space. He must be out of blood. He only has a little strength left to transform. This god is about to fall, Arthas said with a hint of regret. Horus had severed his connection to the resting place of the gods to come to this world. If he died here, he would be truly dead. Thea didn't care. She summoned an owl to point to the fallen feathers. Go pick them up. Maybe you can use them as arrows later. These fell from the body of a god. Chapter 174 Horus becomes a demigod. Thea ignored Arthas's disdainful gaze. This guy knows nothing, she thought. These things are still powerful arrows. After all, we'll have to rely on our old skills when we return to our original time and space. Dragon Queen Takhisis's attacks intensified. A blend of fire and ice, light and quicksand, from initially mixing 2 elements, to 3, then 4. Her understanding of magic and the blending of magical powers surpassed all known mages. This method of killing, which Thea couldn't even name, repeatedly inflicted heavy damage on Horus. Whenever Horus suffered a serious blow, the eagles surrounding the battlefield cried out in unison, their cries mournful and heartbreaking. One of Takhisis's dragon heads observed the birds coldly. Without a single incantation, an invisible shockwave swept in all directions, decimating birds for 1,000 miles, dropping from the sky like dumplings. Even Thea's summoned owl was caught in the crossfire. Just as she was about to summon it again, Takhisis's voice pierced through, coldly, "Those are my spoils." Her voice was incredibly flat, but unyielding. Thea was utterly dejected. What did she mean? Were you planning to take this last deity with you? Such a sinister being was incredibly difficult to communicate with, and Thea had no choice but to endure it. It was like casting a movie. The director and producer have the final say, but once the cast is chosen, if you can't control the lead actor, then the lead actor has the final say. Thea was now the unfortunate director who had chosen a big-name star. Since she had no say, she'd have to watch her perform. The Dragon Queen's future ministry wasn't light, darkness, or even the elements. She favored the broader realms of chaos, time, and war. The summoned being hadn't even reached the stage of igniting the divine fire. Although their attacks were fierce, forcing Horus to retreat, they couldn't immediately defeat this being, who had been a god for countless years. With a resounding thud, Horus summoned his remaining strength and, with one wing, sent the mountain-sized Takhisis soaring. Landing on the ground, he transformed into humanoid form, knelt on one knee, and silently chanted in an unknown language. Thea, possessing a modicum of divinity, understood. This was the divine language, claimed to be supreme between heaven and earth, the ultimate language capable of bridging countless planes of space and time. Great Father, Osiris, please honor the ancient covenant and grant me the power to protect order. His voice was mournful yet resolute. Horus, my son, I will grant you power as promised, but the eye you have deposited with me will no longer be yours. Are you certain? The world remained oblivious to this voice, but a few divine beings heard it. The fearless Dragon Queen took a step back. Thea was almost shaken. Who is this? Osiris. One of the 9 principal gods of ancient Egypt, the handsome and cool god of the underworld. Anubis, the current god of death, is his eldest son, and Horus is his second son. How did this guy come to be? Takhisis may also claim the title of principal god, but that's in her future, not the present. Even if she were, she wouldn't be able to rival this god of the underworld. Her world is too small. Osiris, on the other hand, is a deity of the prime plane. One is the future head of a village tyrant from out of town, while the other is a retired official in charge of local personnel. The superiority is clear at a glance. Fortunately, the retired official had no intention of entering. After confirming Horus's wishes, he vanished, as if he had never been there. With his departure, the earth seemed to come alive. Amidst the violent shaking of the earth's crust, a vast amount of ochre-colored energy surged from the depths, rushing into Horus's body. Much of this energy was extremely complex, and the god accepted it all, unconcerned that absorbing it would damage his very foundation. Hurry, attack him. He's absorbing power from the underworld. Takhisis, relying on her status as a woman, or a female dragon, called out to Thea, unashamedly unleashing a barrage of energy at Horus, who was still absorbing it. It was taboo to watch an enemy like this during its energy-gathering phase, so Thea naturally wasn't about to let him go. She gathered energy again between her fingers and fiercely tapped Horus, who was enveloped in a cocky energy shield. Bright golden beams pierced Horus's shield, causing it to flicker and dim, as if a single breath could shatter it. Thea sighed. This defense was incredibly strong and sturdy. Anything like instant shattering was just an illusion. As long as it wasn't directly breached, it would heal in a split second. Divine power was pure, success or failure. Unlike magic, which required extensive changes, disguises, and transformations, divine power lacked these requirements. It was simple, direct, and unwavering. This was the fundamental difference between the two. Just because Thea's efforts were unsuccessful didn't mean Takhisis hadn't achieved anything either. She couldn't defeat a retired cadre, but she could handle a second-generation official who had resigned to pursue a career in the business world instead of inheriting the family business. She completely fused the 5 elements within her, creating an extremely unstable energy. Thea was terrified, fearing it would explode at any moment. But the Dragon Queen was remarkably calm, unfazed. She compressed a nearly pure white ball of magic twice, compressing it until it was almost liquid. Then, aiming from a distance, she flung it at the kneeling Horus. The two collided at breakneck speed, and the instantaneous explosion of force leveled the surrounding area for thousands of miles, pulverizing not only the pyramids Horus had previously erected but also Thea's infrastructure projects. The Wave Rider was unsurprisingly blown thousands of miles away. Rip Hunter had only time to warn her to be careful before contact was lost. Thea, too, was flung back hundreds of meters by the aftermath of the energy. She managed to stop herself and watch intently. The smoke dissipated, and Horus slowly rose to his feet. He looked drastically changed. His once muscular figure had become incredibly coarse and misshapen, his legs disproportionately large, and his upper body seemed even smaller. His massive eagle-like head, once white, had turned red, and his sharp, azure beak seemed coated in thick ink. A corrosive liquid dripped from the corner of his mouth, dissolving into a deep pit on the ground. His left eye, previously taken from the Vandals, had completely vanished, leaving only a terrifying hole. Perhaps only his right eye remained unchanged. It remained as proud and insightful as ever, but the weariness in its gaze was unconcealable. Foolish fellow. To regain your full strength, you've even deified yourself. Horus's transformation failed to frighten Takhisis. The five-headed dragon queen examined him closely and offered a scornful remark. Yes, No, it's me. I am no longer a god. I have given up my priesthood. I am no longer the patron saint of the pharaoh. Without the pharaoh, the world no longer needs me. What else can I do? I just want to prove my ideals and my justice in the end, Horus, who was surrounded by black air, said firmly. Chapter 175 Dragon Knight Xia. A god who has stepped down from the throne. Haha. I desperately need your power. Let me prove you wrong. Takhisis's 5 dragon heads laughed, their genuine delight evident. They hadn't expected to answer a random summons and encounter such a fool. Just to prove his point, he'd abandoned his proper role as a deity and voluntarily retreated to the level of a demigod. Horus was the second son of Osiris, the god of the underworld. His elder brother, Anubis, had long coveted his father's portfolios, leaving Horus with no choice but to create his own. Throughout his long life as a god, he had cobbled together a few portfolios: Sky, Guardian, and War. Guardian was his primary portfolio, the others scattered. For example, War had its own dedicated deity. The one Horus possessed merely qualified him to inherit the throne. There were 7 or 8 others with the same credentials. When the god of war died in battle, only those with some connection could inherit the war portfolio. Takhisis had no interest in the Guardian of the Sky, but she was somewhat envious of War. This was one of her future primary priesthoods, and being able to access it early on at the demigod stage was incredibly lucky. While the idea was wonderful, a practical problem arose. She was no match for Horus at this point. Although both were demigods, Takhisis was merely a projection entering this world, while Horus was his true form, unapologetically destroying his very foundation, his darkened state nearing full health and mana. While she had a slight advantage in combat skill, she couldn't withstand the opponent's vast health and mana pool. Little girl, come help me. I'll share the spoils with you, Takhisis said, graciously, greeting Thea from a distance. Thea was struggling to communicate with the unicorn, but there was nothing she could do. The adorable creature was unyielding and disliked the evil dragon queen. She feared she would lose focus and be controlled by her to launch a whirlwind attack. Hearing the dragon queen's plea for help, she quickly soothed the unicorn in her mind, fearing the flailing beast would do something that would displease its loved ones and delight its enemies. HMPH, she replied, receiving the unicorn's silent assent. Then, flying to the dragon queen's side, she bowed slightly, speaking in a tone that was neither friendly nor distant. My queen, I will assist you. Focus on his head. He's no longer a god. He'll be injured and die. With a proud flick of her tail, Takhisis charged forward. Tisk, Thea pouted. You needn't say that. Hit someone in the head? How idiotic would I be to hide him in the feet? I'm not Achilles. Though a little annoyed, she nonetheless joined in the attack. It was essentially a ranged attack, just a ranged one. Close combat was a bit risky. Seeing Horus swirling in black mist and shrouded in a gray aura, she felt it was best to avoid it. With Takhisis as her primary focus, she happily took on the promising role of ranged damage. The Dark Dragon Queen was now unleashing her full power. Her combat talent and awareness far surpassed Horus, who had never engaged in a serious fight. She unleashed every possible technique to continuously deplete his shield. Thea also unleashed a few well-timed light finger strikes, hissing the cocky shield. As time dragged on, Takhisis grew increasingly impatient. Her summoning timer was almost up. After all, Thea's summons were still at the mortal level. Summoning a demigod of her rank would have seen her existence slip away rapidly. If her true form hadn't been desperately maintaining the passage in the other world, she would have been sent back long ago. Damn it, Takhisis blasted several more mixed beams at Horus's shield. She wasn't worried about this world being ruled by the evil god, of course, she was simply irritated by the prospect of her prize slipping away. Young lady, do you have any other tricks? Her pride was all she could do, and she could only seek the help of this mortal. Though a powerful mortal, Thea's aura of light had always made her uneasy, so she finally asked her out of desperation. Of course, Thea still had one trick up her sleeve. She believed in always keeping a backup plan, never revealing anything until the very end. Using her special magical powers, she transmitted her voice to the Dragon Queen. When Takhisis first heard her words, her 5 dragon heads and 10 dragon eyes glared at her, their expressions vivid, as if she were debating whether to eat her raw or blaze her to death. But after weighing the pros and cons, she finally gritted her teeth and made a decision. She nodded, signaling Thea, "Come on. I'm going all out today." Thea burst into laughter. What could this mean? A dragon knight, a future god at that? The only way to describe her feelings at that moment was awesome. Murmuring a spell, she needed a size increase spell. Simultaneously, the Dragon Queen shrank her own size, balancing her sides. Thea grew to 10 meters tall, the Dragon Queen to 300 meters. "My queen, I'm on." Thea, having gotten the upper hand and been a bit of a spoiled brat, felt incredibly pleased. Each of Takhisis's dragon heads had a different expression, but they all shared a common displeasure. "Come on, Arthas." The two minds synchronized once again, this time merging to create the unicorn's ultimate weapon. The horn possessed powerful magic-smashing abilities, making it the perfect weapon against Horus, now clad in a tortoise shell. Normally, the horn was quite long, at least half a meter, but it seemed too small for a fight of this size. The two combined their magic to create a 40-meter-long sword, no, a spear. Thea leaped onto Takhisis's back, placing the dragon spear between her red and white dragon heads. Unfortunately, her head was too numerous, obscuring her view, so she had to do it. The Dragon Queen was also deeply uncomfortable. It was like holding a thermometer under one's arm, she was holding it around her neck. It was incredibly awkward, but she endured it for the sake of her post-battle divinity. The next scene was a bit bizarre. A righteous knight, lance in hand, riding an evil dragon, confronted a neutral demigod. "Your Majesty, give up. Your eternal life should not be wasted here." These words were spoken by Thea, the unicorn controlling her body. She had always lamented the fate of this former true god. "Young human, come. I have no regrets. I am exhausted. Even if I die fighting today, I will not resent you." Horus' voice was filled with exhaustion. Though protected by a shield, his inner shell was nearly broken. Descending from godhood was no easy task. He had paid far more than Thea and the others realized. "Huh? This guy can see there are 2 of us." Thea, in her consciousness, chatted with the unicorn in surprise. "Nonsense, the dragon can see it too. You really have no common sense." The unicorn was still dissatisfied with the cooperation with the Dragon Queen, and looked down on her for no reason. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone, see you in the next video.